this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 94 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Health. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders, although I don't think we have any virtual participants for the first panel, so we can dispense with that pursuant to Standing Order 108 Sub 2. And the motion adopted on November 8th, 2023, the committee is resuming its study of the government's advance purchase agreement for vaccines with Medicago. I'd like to welcome the Honourable Mark Holland, Minister of Health, as well as the officials accompanying him this evening from the Department of Health, Dr. Celia Lorenko, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister, Health Products and Food Branch, from the Public Health Agency of Canada, Heather Jeffrey, President, and Dr. Donald Shepard, Vice President, Infectious Diseases and Vaccination Programs Branch. Thank you all for taking the time to appear this evening. I'm going to, before I call on Minister Holland to bring his opening statement, colleagues, we have a convention here that the witness is allowed as much time as the person posing the question to be able to answer. You have a discretion as to whether to let him go longer. I just want to remind you of that. If you're going to, and I will make sure that he gets at least as much time, and it's up to you as to whether to give him more. With that, Minister, welcome to the committee. You have the floor for the next 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is a pleasure to be with you here today, again, back at the Health Committee, and to thank members for the opportunity to talk about the contract with Medicago, and more specifically, to talk about the government's action to ensure that all Canadians had access to a vaccine during the pandemic. And maybe I'll start just by global context of where we were when the darkness of COVID-19 first fell over this country. And folks will remember that there were open questions about whether or not a vaccine would be possible perhaps for 5 years, 10 years. It is an absolute miracle of science that vaccine solutions were found. And I want to thank deeply and profoundly the officials that are with both PHAC and Health Canada for their incredible work during those incredibly difficult times. In April of 2020, Canada established a COVID-19 vaccine task force. This was a multidisciplinary team of external experts and industry leaders in the fields of vaccines and immunology. They were tasked with looking at what were the viable options for a vaccine, and there were 7. Those 7 options, based on science and technical ability to produce, were identified for Canada to move forward to try to ensure that if they did develop, that we would have the opportunity to have Canadians have access. So advanced purchase agreements were entered into, and the idea of entering into an advanced purchase agreement was to both mitigate the risk, to ensure timely delivery, and frankly to make sure that every Canadian had a dose of the vaccine that they needed to save their lives. Now, by their very nature, they were flexible, and they also contemplated from day one that not all 7 would be successful. Remember, we didn't know which one would be successful. We knew there were 7 viable options, but there was no way of knowing which one would manifest as that which would be able to save the lives that was so essential to Canadians. And I think it's important to recognize that strategy of using advanced purchasing agreements, and I'm just going to turn to it because I think it's worth noting, the number of lives that were saved, an estimated 800,000 lives in Canada saved, some 1.9 million hospitalizations averted, and 34 million COVID cases averted. And that was, again, all without knowing which solution would provide that answer. But when we take a look at Medicago, which is the one that's before us today, which was one of those 7 options, this was Canadian-based, and it shared an exciting, innovative technology that used a plant-based for the first time. As you would be aware, most were egg-based. This was the first in the world, an ability, and of course, we don't know how that might be used in the future. It's a really important innovation that I hope will be able to make a huge difference. So with Government of Canada's support, Medicago developed a safe and effective vaccine. In fact, on February 24th of 2022, it was authorized for use in Canada. Now, if it hadn't been for the fact that there were other vaccines that were approved and in the market, and not at that point even on an ancestral strain, but actually are up to date and current with what the most current variants were, it could very well have been a world where we needed Medicago. But the reality is Canada was well underway with an enormously successful vaccination campaign and many other products. And as a result, there wasn't a need to proceed with a Medicago vaccine. That, of course, still meant that we had to honor that stab in the dark that we had to try to make sure that one of those 7 options was there. I would say, though, that just around transparency, because I know there's been a number of questions in this committee on that, that the Public Health Agency of Canada and Public Service and Procurement Canada have shared all the relevant details of this contract. As with the other advanced purchase agreements, they shared it with the Standing Committee on Public Accounts and with the Auditor General, with appropriate confidentiality provisions that are in place. I would also state, as a final step, the Public Health Agency has publicly disclosed the amount paid as part of the public accounts. Subsequent to the tabling of the public accounts, the company agreed to further public disclosure of additional details to identify the company and the amount of the non-refundable advance payment, as well as to confirm the terms of the payment that had been met and that the contract was terminated by mutual consent. I would also highlight that the Office of the Auditor General recently finished auditing the financial transactions of the Public Health Agency of Canada for the 3rd fiscal year in a row and has confirmed the accuracy and the reliability of the financial information. Further, Mr. Chair, committee members will recall that in December of 2022, the Auditor General published an audit of COVID-19 vaccines covering the period of January 1st, 2020 to May 31st, 2022. This report found that the procurement, authorization, allocation, and distribution of vaccines were efficient. In conclusion, at a moment of great confusion, when we didn't know if any solution would be present, Canada took a bet on 7 options, and thank goodness we did. We could never have known which one worked out, and from the beginning, the advanced purchase agreements contemplated that not all of them would. Medicago is one that did pan out, but panned out in a time frame where it was rendered not necessary because of the success of the other options. I want to close by thanking once again the incredible officials who have done unbelievable work to ensure that Canada had one of the best COVID-19 responses anywhere in the world, along with one of the lowest death rates that was seen anywhere in the world. And with that, Mr. Chair, it would be my pleasure to take questions.
Thank you very much, Minister. We'll now begin with rounds of questions, starting with Dr. Ellis, please, for the Conservatives for 6 minutes.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. You know, we know very clearly that this Liberal government has had millions of dollars of wasteful spending, and that issue tonight is talking about this deal with Medicago. $323 million of Canadian taxpayer money was lost. And what was the plan to protect Canadian taxpayers in this contract with Medicago?
Well, to be clear, the amount that we're talking about today is $150 million, and that has to do with the doses secured. There's a separate question around ISED. I expect that Minister Champagne will have news on that and good news on that soon. But with respect to the contract that's in front of us right now, what was done to ensure responsibility was to enter into an advanced purchase agreement where we were able to ensure the doses. And I would put the question to you, if you permit me to ask it. What would have you done if Medicago was the only viable option? What would have you done?
The time is mine, not yours. I appreciate that. And the time to ask questions is for me, not for you. The time is for you to attempt to answer them, which, again, we'll get to that. So what you're telling us is no protection for Canadians in this contract.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there were absolutely assurances that in order to get the vaccines that we needed to be able to enter into an advanced purchase agreement. That advanced purchase agreement contemplated that not everyone would work out. And so there was going to be a cost. Now, I'm not clairvoyant. I expect that you aren't either. Nobody was at that moment in time. We could not know which of those 7 options would work out. So it was prudent to make an investment in each one to ensure that whatever one worked out was available to Canadians. And that's exactly what happened. And that's exactly why we had such a successful vaccination program.
So, again, with respect to Medicago, what you're avoiding, Minister, is really that there were absolutely no protections for Canadians here. this Liberal government invested $173 million in Medicago to start with, and then paid them out $150 million more and received 0 vaccines in a contract that, if I'm not mistaken, Minister, was signed after the pharma tech giant Pfizer had already been approved for use in the United States.
What I'm saying is that at the moment in time in which advanced purchase agreements were entered into, that Canada had a responsibility, I would argue, to make sure that the doses and the right vaccine would be available. And that if, as an example, Medicago turned out to be the only vaccine that worked, and by the way, there's no way that we could have known that that's not the case, then you wouldn't be sitting here in this committee asking the questions, because it would have been Medicago's vaccine that saved all of those lives. Instead, you're asking the questions today because there were other vaccines that were successful.
Because it's very clearly known that the tobacco company was a major investor in Medicago. Everybody knew that, and surely somebody at the Health Canada department must have known that Canada signed on to the Convention for Tobacco Control, and this would never be accepted on the international stage.
Sir, I've been called by Imperial Tobacco a anti-tobacco radical. I was the chair of the Heart and Stroke Foundation. I was on the Ontario Coalition for Action Against Tobacco. But what did not occur,
Minister, this has nothing to do with
sure,
what
it has
your
everything to
pedigree
do with
is,
it, because
absolutely nothing
a
to do with the
minority
question.
position,
If you don't want to answer the questions, just feel free to say, I don't know the answer. It's okay.
Well, it doesn't
but
appear
unless
you want the
nobody
answer.
did their due diligence, or nobody cared, somebody must have known Canada signed on to the Convention for Tobacco Control.
Sir, the reason I gave the other context is I am no fan of tobacco companies. I have worked my entire life to ensure that tobacco
Well, that's not true. You
is
actually
reduced.
allowed nicotine
But what
pouches
I'm
to
saying
be approved
that
in Canada as well.
what I'm saying, well, I don't know whether or not you want me to answer the question. It appears you don't. But if you do want an answer,
but
if you do want an answer to the question, my answer is this: that a minority position that did not advance the interests of either nicotine or tobacco in Medicago. Let me ask you the question:
It's not time for you to ask
would have you
questions.
used? Sure,
You know
it
what?
is. Sure, it is. If you would have you
Minister,
used,
you can have your chance to ask some questions.
Well,
Okay?
I don't.
When you're sitting on the other side, you can have your chance.
I've
Have
been
the
on the
opportunity
other
to
side,
sit
but
there. Then you can
Mr.
ask
Chair,
some
I don't know.
questions.
What do you want here?
Go ahead, Dr. Ellis. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Very clearly, 2 million Canadians are visiting food banks, and your government lost another $323 million without any accountability. And the answer really, I guess, is that you don't care.
Well, I would characterize it this way, that if we didn't take a bet on all 7, then we wouldn't have been able to save those 800,000 lives. I don't know what kind of price you put on 800,000 lives. I put a pretty high price on 800,000 lives. And the reality is we didn't have clairvoyance. I don't know what psychic abilities you had, but I didn't have, and neither did the department have psychic abilities to know which vaccine would work out. So we had to take a bet on all 7. And we knew when we took those advanced purchase agreements that not all of them would work out. And yes, that would cost some money, but that's what we did to make sure that we saved 800,000 lives. That's what we did to make sure that we avoided 1.9 million hospitalizations.
Thank you very much, Minister. And through you, Chair, I guess, we're clearly not getting answers from the Minister. Mitsubishi is the largest company in Japan, and Health Canada and your department entered into a contract with the largest company in Japan, and if not mistaken, the 45th largest company in the world, and you gave them another $323 million with no protection for Canadians. You also gave them the intellectual property, and you received no vaccines, and you lost 400 jobs in Quebec. Now tell me, is that value for money? Tell Canadians it's value for money.
What I think, if I could, Dr. Ellis, is to say that if Canada had not entered into any advanced purchase agreements for vaccines, you're right, we would have saved a little bit of money. But what it would have meant is that we didn't have vaccines for the Canadian population. It would have meant 800,000 people would have died. It would have meant tens of billions of dollars of lost economic activity. It would have meant millions more people in hospitals, with hospitals being shut and people dying from other preventable illnesses.
Thank you very much,
if we
Minister.
didn't make those investments, it would have been catastrophic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Minister Holland. Next, Mr. Johari, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Minister, to the committee. Okay, so let's bringing facts. Let's start bringing facts to the table. So there's a $172 million investment, and there's a $150 million investment. Can you briefly tell us what is the $172 million investment and what was the result of it?
So that is with respect to ISED. That's with respect to the development of the actual intellectual property itself. The $150 million had to do with the vaccines and the distribution of the vaccines.
So had we been had Canada and Medicago been in a position to be able to launch this product not only within Canada but also internationally, what would that $150,000 go toward? Because 172 naturally went on ensuring that we do the R&D, we set up the facility, make sure that we are ready to produce. So we have now an approved product which faced some challenges, and we'll get to that. But the $150 million was specifically earmarked for what?
Well, I think, and this is the point that I'm making. I wish that we were clairvoyant. If we were clairvoyant, then we wouldn't have had to make the decision that we did. But of course, we were not. There were 7 options which were deemed to be technically feasible and on a science-based basis of having the potential to produce a vaccine. The advanced purchase agreements that were entered into in all 7 instances made sure that no matter which one hit, no matter which one won, that Canada was ready to have the vaccines that it needed. So it's very easy in hindsight to say, well, you should have just picked the one that won. Well, that's a little like saying you should have just bought the lottery ticket that won. If you knew which lottery ticket was going to win, why would you bother buying the other ones? The reality is we were in a circumstance at that moment of time where we didn't know what would succeed. So that $150 million was a down payment to ensure that the vaccines would be delivered and that would they be available to Canadians.
So, Minister, I'm really glad that you used the concept of down payment. But before we get to that, I want to go back and try to deal with another piece of misinformation that's going around, that Canada violated the World Health Organization Framework Convention on Tobacco. Specifically on this case, as it relates to securing vaccine, do you believe that this applies to that circumstances or not?
No, I do not. And I think that the minority position that Philip Morris held in Medicago, let me put it to you this way, and I think it's a question the Conservatives didn't want to let me ask, but I'll pose it because I think as a hypothetical, it's a really valuable question to ask. If Medicago had developed the only successful vaccine, and that's a very real probability. We didn't know that are the Conservatives saying that they would not have allowed Canada to use that vaccine to save hundreds of thousands of lives because Philip Morris had a minority position that didn't advance the interests of neither nicotine or tobacco? Of course they wouldn't. Of course they absolutely would have made sure that vaccine, and it would have been reprehensible to do otherwise. I think that we were in a circumstance where we needed to look at what options were technically viable. And the minority position that was held in Medicago did not advance the interests of either nicotine or tobacco.
Okay, so I'm glad you used the terminology of down payment. So we made $150 million down payment to Medicago for production of vaccine upon approval, which happens in Canada and federal government. Did we make such an allowance? And it's now the terminology of for at-risk manufacturing has been thrown around, and I asked Ms. Andreychuk on Monday, what does that term mean? But I assume that's the down payment, and it's almost like down payment on an insurance policy that we're getting. So the question is that the other 7 advanced purchase agreement had such a clause as well?
They did, yeah. Yes, they did. That's right.
Okay, great. So we made the down payment. So again, I'm in a layman. So we went to buy a house. We put the down payment. At some point, we decided that we don't want to buy that house for whatever reason. We mutually walked away. I lose my down payment. Can I simplify it? Can I bring it to that level?
I think you could put it better this way. If you went out and bought an insurance policy and then didn't need the insurance policy, you don't go back to the insurance company and ask for your premiums back. The reality is that you make a bet because you're trying to protect yourself. And that's what Canada did. We bet on 7 different options. And that bet, of course, without knowing which one would materialize, ensured that we had the vaccines that Canadians needed. By putting an investment in each and every one, we were guaranteeing that Canada would have the vaccines that it needed. If we bet on 1 or 2, as it seems the Conservatives are suggesting we should have done, then it would have been highly likely we would have missed the one that was successful, which would have seen the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives in this country.
So out of the 7, I understand 3 or 4 got approval by World Health Organization, and all the 7 had this at-risk manufacturing clause in them. And we are not talking about the others, and yet we are talking about Medicago. And you just confirmed the fact that we would have not, under this circumstances, Canada would not violate any World Health Organization Framework Convention. So why do you think we are having this conversation?
Well, I think it's easy to create misinformation in this space. I think, let's contemplate a world where Medicago was the vaccine that was first and actually ended up being the one that Canadians took. Then instead, we would be in here potentially getting questions about why did you make investments in Pfizer or why did you make investments in AstraZeneca? Because that's exactly what they're saying, right? They're saying that anyone that wasn't successful was a waste of money, as if somehow the government could have known which one was successful. So if there's an alternative universe in which Medicago was the successful vaccine, and instead we'd be sitting in this committee being attacked for having made investments in Pfizer or AstraZeneca or in Moderna.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Johari. Suite, Madame Vignola, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Holland, ladies, gentlemen, thank you for being with us this evening. The $150 million written off as a loss in the public accounts are for payments for receipt of vaccine ordered by Health Canada. We understand that this was certified in the U.S. and also in Canada. But the WHO decided not to consider it as one of the solutions because one of the shareholders, a minority shareholder, was a tobacco company. In 2005, Canada signed the International Framework Convention. I understand from your earlier answer that it was impossible to guess. Well, I mean, it would have been predictable that the WHO would reject this vaccine if there were any other vaccines. Maybe if it was the only one, the WHO would have accepted it. Before doing all of this, did you investigate before the WHO made its decision? Did you look into the possibilities that Mitsubishi could get rid of Philip Morris before the approval? Did you ask Medicago for this? Thank you very much for your question. If possible, I will answer in English. It's easier for me because there are more technical issues here.
The question of whether or not that it was predictable that who would reject it, there are 2 things that I would say in response. Number one, that it would not, Canada had the sole ability to be able to approve this vaccine. So when it was approved in the date was February of 2022, that would have allowed it for its use in Canada. The decision made by WHO would not have affected that. Secondly, I reject in its entirety the idea that WHO took its position or that affected our position. Those are 2 separate things. The decision at WHO at that point in time, not only was the other vaccines available, those vaccines were actually for the current variants as opposed to being on the ancestral strain. So WHO was making its decision at a time when all the other options were available in the world. I would posit to you that WHO would have made a very different decision if Medicago had the only viable vaccine. So it had to do with the competitiveness of the other options as opposed to the fact that the minority position existed in Medicago from Philip Morris.
On s'entend là-dessus. Well, we agree about that. And before signing the agreement and before the WHO decided to assess, or I don't even think they assessed the vaccine, only the shareholders, because they didn't reject the vaccine, they rejected the shareholders. So before any of that was done, did you require of Medicago to eliminate Philip Morris as a shareholder? Did the Government of Canada offer any potential solutions to make it possible for Phyllis Morris to withdraw as a shareholder?
There's two important things. Again, that at the time at which the WHO made its decision, first of all, that was independent of a decision that would have happened in Canada. The vaccine that was developed by Medicago, if it was first out of the gate, would have been the one Canada was using. Secondly, with respect to rejecting the shareholders, they were doing that because at that moment in time, there were a bevy of other options that were not on the ancestral strain, but in fact on the most current strain. The last point that you made about divestment of Philip Morris has completely divested itself. It had a minority position in Medicago. It no longer has a position in Medicago. So I suppose it's an academic exercise.
Merci.
Thank you. Briefly, what about intellectual property? Who does Medicago's intellectual property belong to now?
Yeah, this is a question Minister Champagne is looking at and continues to pursue. It's outside of the $150 million that we're talking today. It's an important question. He's going to have, he's working on that, and I expect that there'll be more information on that in the future, near future.
La maison mère de
Medicago's parent company was bought by Aramis Biotech in Sainte Foy. Do you know whether this included intellectual property, or was this another aspect of the conversation that Mr. Champagne will eventually perhaps give us the details about?
Question for Minister Champagne, but I will say that one of the things that is important to note here is that the innovative technology that was developed by Medicago, which is plant-based as opposed to being egg-based, has tremendous potential in the future with respect to future vaccine efforts, and so its intellectual property is extremely important.
En effet, les plantes.
Yes, it's a very new technology, and it would make it possible for people who are allergic to eggs would be able to become vaccinated, which is not currently the case. So in negotiations with Medicago, were there any special clauses regarding cancellation and protection of intellectual property?
There are certain aspects I can and can't speak on because there are confidentiality provisions. So I would turn to officials because I want to make sure that I'm not answering in a way that would be inappropriate.
Brief response, if you can, Ms. Jeffrey.
I would say the provisions of the contracts are subject to non-disclosure confidentiality agreements, so they were disclosed to the Public Accounts Committee, but in a public forum, we can't speak to the other details of the contract.
Thank you. Merci, Madame Vignola.
Thank you, Ms. Vignola. Next, Mr. Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being here. Minister, was Philip Morris International's 21% ownership in Medicago known by the federal government at the time it signed its advance purchase agreement?
It was.
And was the fact that Medicago was headed by the tobacco giant's former vice president of regulatory and scientific affairs known to the government at the time it signed its advance purchase agreement?
Yes, it was not.
Okay, thank you. Now, the WHO has confirmed that it disapproves of tobacco industry involvement in drug companies and believes, quote, there is a fundamental and irreconcilable conflict between the tobacco industry's interests and public health policy interests, end quote. Do you agree with that view?
I do.
Now, we've already talked about the framework, the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. Guidelines on implementing that treaty state, quote, government should not, quote, accept, support, or endorse partnerships with the tobacco industry or any entity or person working to further its interests, end quote. Given that Philip Morris International owned 21% of Medicago shares at the time the Government of Canada signed its advance purchase agreement with the company, can you explain why the government didn't believe that this entity was working to further the interests of the tobacco industry?
So I completely agree with everything that you said around the need to not advance the interests of nicotine and tobacco. That wasn't what was at stake here. What was at stake here is a Canadian-based company that had an innovative solution. And yes, there was a minority position held by Philip Morris, but the interests of being able to produce a vaccine for Canada, and given the innovative nature of this technology, meant that the minority position, which did not advance the interests of tobacco or nicotine, I think weighed on the decision being made by this expert panel that this was an important option to pursue.
At the time that the government signed its advance purchase agreement, did it give any consideration to the fact that the WHO may end up rejecting Medicago's vaccine because of its ties to the tobacco industry?
Well, again, I think there's two important points here. First are that in a Canadian context, the decision by WHO would not affect our ability to distribute and approve the vaccine. In fact, the vaccine was approved for use in Canada in February of 2022. That's point one. Point two, I think I very much feel that the WHO, if Medicago had been the only viable option in front of it, would have made a different decision. And that the decision that the WHO made at that point in time was based at a moment in time when not only was it not on the ancestral strain, but it was on the evolved strain of the coronavirus, and there was a wide range of vaccines that were available at that point in time.
Okay, that seems fair from the Canadian government's point of view, but here's what actually happened. In March 2022, the WHO decided not to accept Covifenz for emergency use because of Medicago's ties to the tobacco industry. So they came to a different conclusion than the government of Canada would have. But here's the thing. The reason that Covifenz was not proceeded with was not because the government of Canada decided not to, but I'm quoting from a February 2023 Mitsubishi Chemical Group news release, which says, after a comprehensive review of the current global demand and market environment for COVID-19 vaccines and Medicago's challenges in transitioning to commercial scale production, the group has determined it would not pursue the commercialization of Covifenz. So isn't it true, Minister, that the reason that Medicago didn't proceed was because it was not commercially viable for them to produce this vaccine if they couldn't sell it to the world? They certainly wouldn't have proceeded with full commercialization if only Canada was going to proceed with it. Isn't that right?
So what is true is that Medicago had challenges stabilizing the vaccine for mass production, as I understand it, and that that there would have been further investments needed in order to be able to get it into a position of broad-scale distribution. But certainly, if they were the only viable option, if they were a different place, those investments would have been made. It was the fact. But I don't think you can ignore the fact that there were a large number of very successful vaccines that were already in wide deployment.
I understand,
so those investments wouldn't have been logical.
I'm not ignoring a hypothetical if it were the only one. That's hypothetical. What I'm pointing at is the fact that Medicago couldn't sell its vaccine because the WHO said they're not going to approve it for emergency use worldwide. And there's no way that in that environment, any vaccine manufacturer is going to proceed with a vaccine when it couldn't sell it anywhere, except for maybe Canada.
But the problem is that it's not a hypothetical. At the moment in which you're talking, there was a wide range of vaccines that were approved, not for the ancestral strain, but for the most current strains of the virus at that moment in time. And so there simply wasn't the need. So why would the investment been made? What I'm saying is, if that situation didn't exist, right, then and we didn't have a vaccine, then that certainly would have been a different circumstance.
Right.
And of course it would have to be.
So here's the bottom line. Your government signed a treaty not to accept or support the tobacco industry or any entity working to further its interests. You then signed a contract with a pharmaceutical company that's 21% owned by the tobacco industry. Square that for me.
There was only one Canadian-based option that showed that it scientifically had the technological and scientific ability to develop a vaccine. The minority position that Philip Morris had in it did not advance the interests of tobacco or nicotine, but it certainly was a viable option in order to save hundreds of millions of lives. In the moment that we were dealing with, when we did not know whether or not we would have any vaccine, when we were all worried for our families and loved ones, the decision to be made to make sure that the country had a vaccine is one that I think was the right decision.
That's your time.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr.
Davies. Thank you, Minister. We're going to go back to the Conservatives now for 5 minutes, beginning with Dr. Ellis, please.
Oh, Mr. Perkins.
Mr. Perkins, please, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair. Minister, you're painting these hypothetical worlds to justify a $323 million loss for the Canadian taxpayer. Before this contract was signed, either to develop the vaccine or to buy the massive amount of 76 million doses, the U.S. had already approved Pfizer. So this world that you say didn't exist because you didn't know whether or not a vaccine would exist. Actually existed months before that. It was already approved by the U.S.
That's simply not true. I mean, I don't have the timeline with me, but I could turn to
It was
Mr.
approved
Shepard.
in the summer. This was the contract.
If you're interested in the answer, I can refer to Mr. Shepard. If you're making
Unless
a
he
political
has it,
point and don't want an
if he
answer,
has it
then
as
I
figures,
can
tips, he
move
can
on.
get it. If not, you can send it to the committee in writing.
It's simply not true. If you want the truth, then we can provide it. But what you've said is not factually true. It's not true in substance or in fact.
Well, the other thing that's not true, because have you read the contract?
Have I read it? Look.
Yes or no?
Have I read the contract?
Have you read the contract to buy the vaccines?
I have not read the full contract.
No, if you had, you'd know, unlike the government Liberal members, the $323 million that's been wasted and the $150 penalty payment you've paid is not a down payment. It's not insurance. It's not a mortgage. It's none of those things. There is no clause in that contract that required any money up front. It's a penalty payment for not meeting your commitments under the contract. Isn't that true?
No. I've described the nature of the advance purchase agreements.
What clause does it say you have to pay a payment?
If you're
Let him
if you
finish,
are
Mr.
interested
Perkins.
in badgering me, you're succeeding. If you're interested in an answer, I return to Madam Jeffrey.
Say the $150 million was the advance payment for the at-risk manufacture of those vaccines to guarantee Canadian access to doses from Medicago.
There's no advance payment clause in the contract. In fact, will you release the contract publicly? Because before public accounts, the president of Mitsubishi said he would release an unredacted copy of it publicly. Will you release it since the president was willing to release it?
I can respond to that. The contract has been released in its entirety, unredacted. The Public Accounts Committee and to the Auditor General.
Publicly. He said he would release it
Releasing
publicly.
contracts publicly would place Canada's ability to enter into contracts with any company in vast jeopardy. And of course, you know that, and that's the game
Well,
you're
it's the same
playing.
reason why you're not releasing the Stellantis
it's the game you're
contracts,
playing,
because
to try
you
to create
don't-
misinformation.
You're hiding the fact that what you're saying here is simply not true. That it doesn't require you to pay this. It's a penalty because you entered a contract that said you had to buy 78 or $76 million doses. So I'll ask you again, who owns the IP?
The question of the IP is an ongoing matter,
not an
and it's not the subject of this committee's discussion.
It is, because you're spending $323 million of Canadian taxpayer money, and the president of Mitsubishi, before public accounts, publicly said not only would he release the contract publicly, but he also said that the IP was owned by them, not by the government of Canada. So has Mitsubishi sold the IP?
I'm not going to respond to questions around IP today. Those matters are being dealt with by Minister Champagne. He will respond to them. But I will say to you that looking backwards with the knowledge that you have now of what worked and what didn't is a very curious way to approach this. And I certainly hope that no future government would be saddled with the kind of decision-making that you're inferring that we should have taken.
Yes, it's true. We would never sign a contract that doesn't make sure that $200 million of Canadian taxpayer money, then the Canadians don't own the IP. We would never sign a contract that says I'm going to have to pay $150 million in a penalty because I didn't receive a single vial of a vaccine. We would never sign a contract that allows the largest company in Japan to sell Canadian financed IP to anyone in the world that works. The level of incompetence of this government in signing these contracts, when ministers don't even read the contracts. You haven't read them. You weren't the minister of the time, but I would have thought that in preparation for this meeting, you would have read the contract.
Sir, the officials that operate, and one day I hope it doesn't happen, but one day if you are in government, the experts and the individuals that we rely upon to enter into these contracts do so at arm's length. We do not make a decision, as me as a minister, to tell how we enter into contracts.
I didn't say
and
you
if
made-
you're
I didn't
suggesting
say-
that you would reach over and tell the
No, what I'm
bureaucracy how you
suggesting
would
is
do
I would read a
contracts,
contract
I'm saying there
before
would be no
Congress.
contracts, and you
Well,
would
he
not
got
have
equal
protected
time.
this country.
He got equal
And
time.
no, I mean,
yet.
I haven't
What I'm
hit
saying
the
is I
time
would
of his
read a
question, so
contract
I don't know,
before I
Mr.
sign
Chair.
it and before I pissed away $323 million of
Perkins, your
Canadian
question
taxpayer money.
took 40 seconds. You interrupted him after about 8, and he's not finished his answer. You don't have time to ask another question because you're out of time, but you have time to complete your answer, Minister. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. What I would say, Mr. Chair, let's actually think about what has just been said. The member has just suggested that were he in government, he would have extended beyond the powers of government to tell and dictate terms to bureaucrats about how they should enter into contracts. And of course, they're going to make a point of order because they don't want to have me make this point.
Just a second, Minister. Yes.
I guess I'm requesting clarification that, you know, that the time is related to the actual person asking the question. I would suggest to the chair that there's no convention to say that the minister has the ongoing ability to elaborate well beyond the time allotted per session to answer the question. And I would suggest to you, Chair, that it would be exceptionally beneficial that if the rounds were as prescribed time-wise.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Mr. Perkins asked his question with 1 minute and 19 seconds left in his turn. With 40 seconds left, he finished his question, which meant that the remaining 40 seconds of his turn was for Minister Holland, and he was interrupted incessantly during those 40 seconds. So Minister Holland can finish his answer, and then we're going to move on.
Point of order.
Go ahead.
The 5-minute allotment is my allotment to make questions or comments. It isn't a guarantee. I could use the whole 5 minutes on a speech. So, Chair, I believe you're wrong in that interpretation. That 5 minutes ends at 5 minutes, whether I'm speaking or whether the witness is speaking.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Okay.
I would, if there's another round, I'm happy to wait to be asked the question, and it seems they don't want to hear my answer, but I'd be happy to give the answer. I'd be happy to give the answer if asked by members who wanted to hear it.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Holland. Ms. Atlin, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'll thank the Minister and the officials for being here with us this afternoon or this evening. It's getting quite late. And you know, I really appreciate this conversation. I appreciate it for many reasons. And I think predominantly because the worst of the pandemic is in the rearview mirror. And there were so many lessons that we learned over this very difficult time. And I've had hundreds of conversations with constituents about this time, about the ongoing, you know, the impacts that we're still feeling in community. We've talked about some of the fears, the misinformation. We talked about procurement, and we talked about our ability to respond in the future as well. So I'm often asked about our internal capacity, our domestic capacity around vaccine production. And I know that the Auditor General's report on COVID-19 vaccines indicated that Canada had very limited domestic capacity to produce vaccines and therefore was reliant on international imported products. Why was this?
Well, I don't think we made the investments that were necessary in the past. I think that is a failure of successive governments. What we saw, and I had an opportunity to visit in just outside of Montreal, the facility that Moderna is building to allow us to have that domestic capacity. We're doing that for both mRNA, and we also have a facility operated by Sanofi that is being built in Canada that's going to be able to produce the influenza. But I'd like to, with your indulgence, through you to the chair, to be able to respond to the points that I wasn't allowed to make earlier, if that's possible.
Please do.
It's an important point because I think folks have to understand fundamentally the role of government. When a government is elected and you get the honor of being a minister, you do not have the opportunity to dictate the terms of a contract. That would be entirely inappropriate. You would approve a contract, but saying that you would get into the details of a contract and order a department how to do a contract and put your hand into the writing of a contract, it would be wholly inappropriate. And I think that it is very concerning to hear the Conservatives say that they would not have signed advance purchase agreements, that they would not have made the investments in those different options. I don't hear them saying that they would have picked one winner. What I'm hearing is they wouldn't have entered into any kind of agreement and that they wouldn't have listened to experts around what terms needed to be entered into in order to get those advance purchase agreements. So what we're hearing very clearly from the Conservatives, and thank goodness it didn't occur, that if they were in power, they wouldn't have signed advance purchase agreements, which means this country wouldn't have vaccines, which means we would have had a disastrous public health outcome. And thank goodness that didn't happen.
And on that piece, so how did Canada exercise due diligence on the 7 vaccine companies it entered into the APAs with? And perhaps that would be a question for the officials.
So there was an independent arm's length group of advisors, the Expert Advisory Committee of Vaccine Task Force. They assessed all of the different technologies that were available. They recommended that Canada pursue a portfolio approach to concluding APAs. So that portfolio, the 7 APAs that we did conclude, comprised a wide variety of technologies ranging from mRNA to protein subunit to viral vector vaccines, and a variety of platforms, including the plant-based innovative technology of Medicago.
And Minister, in your opening, you really highlighted the decision-making process is really built around ensuring everyone had access to these life-saving vaccines. And I think about, vulnerable populations across the country. I think about Indigenous communities, and I'm particularly proud about how the government responded in First Nation communities. And can you speak to how, this diversification of portfolios actually helped us to be able to respond, including all of those populations that are potentially more vulnerable or, would have been more, at risk?
Well, I think, let's first of all praise science. The number of vaccines that ended up being available and successful is a testament to human ingenuity and absolutely incredible. And what ended up happening is we had a variety of vaccines that were available to Canadians, which meant in different health circumstances and in different ways we could deploy exactly what was needed. And of course, if we didn't make those advance purchase agreements and make a bet on those 7 different options that an independent expert panel looked at, and by the way, ended up being correct because they picked a number of the ones that ended up being successful. If they hadn't have done that, then that means that we wouldn't have had the kind of success being in Indigenous communities, as you point out, because we had the right mixture and approval of vaccines, it meant that we were able to be in Indigenous communities and get an incredibly high rate of vaccination, which saved untold lives. It's a remarkable success story.
Do I have any more time, Mr. Chair?
20 seconds.
20 seconds. Okay. Well, I'll thank the officials in particular for your hard work during that time, and thank you, Minister, for being here with us.
Thank you very much, Ms. Atwin. Suite, Madame Vignola, pour 2 minutes et demi.
2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. Minister, can you say yes or no? Was there a termination clause in the contract, whether Medicago or any other contract? Were there any cancellation clauses? No details, just yes or no.
Yes, there were specific clauses for cancellation.
Merci. Est-ce que ces clauses font partie?
Thank you. And are these clauses part of the financial clauses of any contract?
So we would require confidentiality.
Monsieur le ministre, pourquoi ne pas avoir?
Mr. Minister, why did you not require a reimbursement of the sums by Mitsubishi?
Well, as I said, the advance purchase agreement, the way that it was structured, was that we knew that it was going to be lost. I mean, let's be very clear. The advance purchase agreements were structured with the 7 different vendors that were entered into, that if they didn't end up being successful, that was going to be lost money. We went into that eyes wide open.
Merci. Est-ce qu'une analyse de risque sur...
Was a risk analysis performed on Medicago before moving forward with the granting of these sums, and is it possible to know what these risk analyses showed?
Yeah, I think, again, I talked about the COVID-19 vaccine task force. It was an independent, multidisciplinary team of external experts and industry leaders. They were the ones that made the determination of what had scientific viability and what might. And again, I think it's quite remarkable that they identified the ones that were successful, including Medicago.
Est-ce qu'on peut avoir cette...
Can the committee have this analysis? Can it be tabled with the committee?
It's not possible.
Monsieur Shepherd, qu'est-ce que...
Mr. Shepherd, why can't this analysis be tabled with the committee?
It's my understanding that the details of the deliberations and recommendations were ministerial communications and therefore are confidential at this present time.
See, Madame Vignola.
Thank you, Ms. Vignola.
Please, for 2.5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Minister, on February 24th, 2022, Health Canada announced in a news release that it authorized Medicago's Covivence vaccine. Same day, Medicago put out a press release, and Takashi Nagao, the president and CEO of Medicago, said this, quote, "We're grateful for the Government of Canada's support in the development of this new vaccine, and we are manufacturing doses to start fulfilling its order," end quote. Why didn't we receive the doses?
As I indicated, after the approval, it became clear that we had the doses that we needed. The other vaccines that were available meant that the Medicago, which is a division of Mitsubishi, doses were not required.
So did you inform Medicago, did the government inform Medicago that we would not be needing those doses?
I'm not sure if I can answer to that level of granularity. I would defer to Mr. Shepard.
So discussions were ongoing with Mitsubishi and most specifically Medicago about what our needs were and what their production capacity was. They were ongoing from the time of approval through, as you had
But
already...
did Canada tell them we don't need the vaccine doses because we already have enough?
As you had mentioned, initially there were challenges with commercial scale production. When they were in a position to provide at commercial scale, they were informed that at that point in time, which is when we refer to as having all the other vaccines, we were not in need of production.
In February 2023, Mitsubishi Chemical Group announced its decision to cease all of its operations at Medicago. So did we not have a clause in the contract that said if Medicago closes down and doesn't produce the vaccines that we've paid for, that we would get our money back?
I mean, I can answer that. I mean, again, with the nature of the advanced purchase agreements are that you're taking a risk because there were 7 viable options, all of which were large companies that we expected to maintain viability. But there was a risk, and that risk we ensured.
But, Minister, if the company shuts down and doesn't fulfill its part of the bargain, that's not a risk.
Well, the reason it shut down is
breaching a contract.
But the reason it shut down was because of the success of other vaccines. So
well, that's not what they said. They said they shut down because of the Medicago's challenges in transitioning to commercial scale production. That's what they said in their own release.
That's correct, because as in any marketplace, you are against your competitors, and they're against their. If there were no competitors, if they were the only one in the market, then they would have proceeded. But the reality is, the marketplace was replete with vaccine options.
Wouldn't it have been better to at least get the doses? At least we got something for the value.
They were not needed. They were not needed, and we had the doses that we needed from the vendors that we had.
Thank you. Suite, Monsieur Paulus, pour...
Next, Mr. Paulus, 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Minister, ladies and gentlemen. Initially, when those 7 companies were given contracts, you knew, well, first of all, when Medicago was authorized, when the vaccine was authorized, and then afterwards we found out that the WHO refused, questions were asked. Now everybody was being avoidant and didn't want to answer the questions. And now we know that the government knew full well after signing the 2005 convention. Last week, Public Works officials confirmed that the government knew that there was a problem. And now, today we're talking about losing $323 million, and we're hearing that the government took a risk. Are you willing to admit today that this was a known risk, and you still went ahead with it?
All the advanced purchase agreements, every single one of them was a known risk, and we knew that not all 7 would pan out, first of all. Secondly, as I had previously indicated, on the February date of 2022, Medicago was in fact approved. And so the decision by WHO is separate and apart from the use in a Canadian context. But 100%, all 7 came with risk. And we had to do that because there's no way that we would get companies to agree to enter into advanced purchase agreements without placing money on the table to ensure that they had their investments covered.
Vous saviez pertinemment, c'est dit maintenant, qu'il y avait...
But you knew full well that there was a problem. You knew that Medicago was not going to get the WHO's approval, and that you knew about the framework agreement, and then $323 million spent, and today having a company that just walks away with no return on this investment. The Quebec government also had agreements and also had reimbursement clauses, and Mitsubishi did reimburse the Quebec government. So why didn't the federal government have that kind of agreement? Or if they are such agreements, why aren't you disclosing them?
Completely disagree that that we knew there was a problem. The fact of the matter is that, as I said, WHO and the decisions that it made was under the context of having all kinds of other vaccines that were available. The decision was completely separate and apart from the decision decision that was made in Canada, which was to approve the vaccine. It was, in fact, available. So the reality is that vaccine was available. The WHO decision did not affect that. And secondly, the WHO decision was in the context of all kinds of other vaccines that were already approved. So trying to simplify it that way is just simply not accurate.
On va rester avec vous. Le médical.
All right. I'll stay with your reasoning. Canada approved the drug, and even if the WHO didn't agree, we could have used it in Canada. Several citizens didn't want to have the other Pfizer Moderna vaccines because of the mRNA, but they would have wanted to have Medicagos. So why not then allow these vaccines to be available for Canadians who would have liked to have a different kind of vaccine other than the mRNA ones?
You're right, there was mRNA hesitancy, but we had non-mRNA options that were already on the table. So, and actually, that's a success of the advanced purchase agreement. We did, because that way we not only had mRNA, but we had non-mRNA options. So at that point in time, Canada had the vaccines that it needed, and it meant that we didn't need to proceed with Medicago, and therefore that was the right decision.
Mais je reviens à ma question du début.
Going back to my initial question, will you admit that you made a mistake coming to this agreement with Medicago, because there were other vaccines in development and you spent $323 million, which you invested into a company where you knew that the company said it was going to take a lot more time to develop, and it was far from certain it took 2 years. That was faster than expected. But do you agree that this was a useless risk?
Fundamentally, no. If I was the health minister at that time, I would have 100% made this decision. It was the right decision. We could not have known which of the 7 would have worked out. I'm deeply proud of not only the government, but officials of entering into these agreements and ensuring that Canada had them. Look, if I could go back in time and not sign a contract, sure, with the knowledge that I have now, but I didn't have that knowledge. No one had that knowledge. No one was clairvoyant. There was no Jojo the psychic to call.
Thank you, sir. Dernière question. Les contrats.
Last question. So when I was at Government Operations Committee, we looked at all of the audits for Pfizer Moderna to get the prices. Minister Anand at the time said it's secret, secret, secret. In the U.S. and Israel and EU, you had the price of vaccines. We knew Americans were paying $7 a dose. In Canada, we did the calculations and we ended up with $25 a dose. How come today we still don't know how much a vaccine cost?
When we enter into contracts as a government, there are confidentiality agreements that are signed, and those confidentiality agreements, frankly, assure us that companies will sign contracts with us. If we didn't do it, we would do no business with anybody. It is an absolute requirement of us doing business. So, but what is important is the Public Accounts Committee and the Auditor General receive the full unredacted documents. And the Auditor General, if you want to give me a moment, I can read what she said in explaining exactly. The Auditor said, and I quote, "In such an environment, advance payment and obligations for minimum purchases were required. Further, Canada had very limited domestic capacity to produce vaccines and therefore was reliant on internet imported products. We found, although a non-competitive approach was taken, Public Services and Procurement Canada exercised due diligence on the 7 vaccine companies conducting assessments."
Point of order, Chair. Chair, point of order.
Go ahead, Dr. Ellis.
I do want to significantly object to the minister grandstanding and moving well beyond the 5 minutes, 50 seconds, indeed, well beyond the Conservative member's time of 5 minutes, which sadly, Chair, gives him an opportunity to grandstand his clairvoyance that he wishes that he had or doesn't have or thinks he has, and totally inappropriate at this committee.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis. It seems there's a bit of grandstanding going on.
Point of order on a separate point of order, please.
A separate point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since the Liberal Minister of Health a couple times tonight has thrown the Liberal Minister of Industry under the bus on the intellectual property side, I think it's incumbent upon this committee to urgently have the Minister of Industry before it to answer for the lack of IP ownership and the failure by his efforts to ensure that that was in by the minister's own standards. He's not responsible. Can you inform us when the can you inform us as part of the point of order? Can you inform us when the Minister of Industry will be here?
That's not a point of order. The Minister of Industry has been invited. We have not yet been successful in securing a date, but it is he has been invited. We are now going to go to the last questioner for this round, and that's Dr. Hanley, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Minister, for being here, and thank you, officials, also for attending. And Thanks for asking for answering some tough questions. You did ask a couple as well. So, but I wanted to say, how would you describe? And I'm picking up on a theme that my colleague Ms. Atwin started. But how would you describe Canada's domestic vaccine manufacturing capacity before March 2020?
Well, it simply wasn't there. I mean, I think there was a recognition, COVID-19, I think, illuminated a lot of areas where we had to do better. And I think that, there was a lot of things. I think at the time I was the whip, and I think back to that moment and looking at the parliamentary pandemic preparedness plan, and I asked for it, and I was given a single piece of paper that really nobody could have imagined what was coming. And so we have to take the lessons, and one of those is making sure we have domestic manufacturing. That's why we have the ability now are developing the ability right now to be able to develop mRNA and influenza vaccines here domestically. That's huge. It's huge for industry. It's huge for protection of public health.
Yeah, and can you describe how we got to that position where we actually lost vaccine manufacturing capacity?
Well, there were cuts made by successive governments, most particularly by the Conservatives, who cut deeply into these areas. And I think it's one of the things we have to be very careful about in public health. You can cut in public health. And when the Conservatives talk about cutting, you have to cut. You don't always see the impacts of those cuts right away. But when you have a public health emergency, or when over the span of time, when you have the impact of underinvesting in public health, of course, it ends up being much, much more costly and much more damaging by having those cuts.
So you might say that when there are more short-sighted governments might be inclined to cut public health spending when they see success in programs rather than proactively investing to be prepared for emergencies and crises.
Well, I mean, if you take the comments that were made by the Conservatives today at their face value, they wouldn't have entered into advanced purchase agreements. They wouldn't have had vaccines for the country. And then you have to wonder, with all the talk of cuts they've made, whether or not they would be investing in domestic manufacturing. So when they talk about cuts and cuts and cuts and don't tell us where they're going to be, we have to look back to their past. And the decisions they made were to cut in places like public health to devastating effect.
Thank you. So in terms of the 7 APAs, would you call that in general risk mitigation, having 7 different APAs with different vaccine technologies at play?
100%. I think that we had to take a bet on all viable options. And of course, that wasn't us making that decision. There was an external group of experts who were convened as experts in virology, experts in immunology, and industry leaders who were brought together to advise the government on what were the viable options, and then to go and get advanced purchase agreements. And again, it's easy now. Madam Atwin was talking about, the environment we're in now, where we're largely feeling safe. You go back to the beginning of the pandemic, none of us were feeling safe. We were terrified about what was going to happen to the people that we loved. And if the government made the decision to follow the advice the Conservatives were taking about not entering into advanced purchase agreements and just sort of, I guess, letting the wind blow and see what would happen, I can't imagine the thousands of lives that would have been lost.
Thanks. And just a couple of more questions, but in your opinion, I know you are not involved either as minister, and clearly this was, as you say, recommended by a panel of experts. But do you see Medicago as one of the candidates chosen on its own merits, or was there also an element of the domestic, building domestic manufacturing capacity that would have weighed into that decision, or are they two separate, what would you call that, influences and considerations?
No, very much on its technical merit. Look, this was an innovative technology that is plant-based, and there are most vaccines are developed off of eggs, and of course we now have mRNA. But having additional options, we can't imagine what that's going to mean for us. So while we didn't need Medicago right now, this innovative technology could very well save countless lives in the future. We do not know the direction either of of this pandemic or future pandemics or other viral threats. And so having more options at our disposal is excellent. But the technical merit, the scientific merit of Medicago was present, and of course was evidenced in the fact that they did manifest a viable vaccine.
Thank you, Dr. Hanley, and thank you, Minister. That concludes our rounds of questions. We genuinely appreciate you making yourself available, and I would have to say, share the kind words that you have passed along to your team for their work throughout. So thanks to you all. You're welcome to stay, but you're free to leave. Colleagues, we're going to suspend because we need to do some sound tests for the next panel, so the meeting stands suspended for about 5 minutes. Pursuant to Standing Order 108 Sub 2 and the motion adopted on May 16th, 2022, the committee is now going to resume its study of women's health. As we have some remote participants, for their benefit, I'd offer the following comments. For those participating remotely, you have on the bottom of your screen interpretation available to you. You have there's 3 channels: Floor, English, and French. Please don't take screenshots or take photos of your screen. I would like to welcome our panel of witnesses. Appearing today is an individual, Dr. Stephen Narad, a senior scientist; Jacques Simard, professeur titulaire, département de médecine moléculaire, Université de Laval.
Laval University, professor of molecular medicine.
Doctor of Medicine, and representing Dense Breast Canada, Jenny Dale, co-founder and executive director, appearing by video conference, and Dr. Paula Gordon by video conference. Thanks to all of you for being here with us today. You each have 5 minutes for your opening statement, and we're going to begin with Dr. Narad. You have the floor. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm a professor in the School of Public Health at the University of Toronto, the Dalla Lana School of Public Health, and I'm grateful to the government, the federal government. I hold the Canada Research Chair in Breast Cancer, which I've held for the past 21 years, and I've been a professor at Women's College and University for 25 years, focused almost entirely on breast cancer. One of my topics of interest is early detection and screening, and in 2014 published what was considered kind of a landmark paper. I was the senior author responsible for the statistical analysis and the write-up of the Canadian National Breast Cancer Screening Study, which was a study of mammography. In that study, we took 90,000 women across Canada, randomized half. This started in 1983. Randomized half of them randomly to a mammography every 5 years. The other 50% received a physical examination. Followed them for 25 years. Published in 2014 with my mentor, Dr. Tony Miller, and after the 25 years of follow-up, we saw almost exactly the same number of deaths from breast cancer in those women who received 5 mammograms, 500, and in those that received no mammograms, 505. That led me to the conclusion that mammography was capable of early detection. The mammographically detected cancers were smaller. They were less likely to be node positive. And the survival of the women with the mammogram-detected cancers was much better. It unfortunately didn't result in any reduction in the number of deaths. In fact, there was 177 women who had their breast cancer detected by the mammogram, non-palpable. They found the breast cancer by the mammogram, who were alive at the 30-year mark. And I believe 177 of those women thought the mammogram saved their lives and would testify to it and do a testimonial saying, we really believe in mammogram. I had a mammogram. It caught my breast cancer before it was palpable, before you could feel it by a mass, and yet the number of deaths was the same. Now, the study has been criticized. I think to a large extent people criticize that which they don't like. I mean, I've written hundreds and hundreds of papers, 730 papers on breast cancer. That was probably the one that had the most response to it, largely, I think, because we showed that we didn't believe that mammography was capable of reducing mortality from breast cancer. A lot of allegations were made against the paper, and generally, though, in the lay press and the people. Anyway, I took the allegations seriously, and I went back to the data and reviewed all the data, whether the allegations were consistent with the findings, and came to the conclusions that they were not. I hold the paper to be the standard of scientific research. I think it remains to be the best breast cancer screening study done, and I think the results are valid. I could go on, but is that my 5 minutes?
Oh, you have another minute.
I got another minute.
Want it.
So, yeah, I've been studying breast cancer in all its formats for 25 years. Much of what I study is early detection. Now, we have to think of the concept. Mammography works. Mammography finds cancers when they're small and node negative. There's no doubt that a mammogram will pick up a cancer when it's small and node negative, and those have good prognosis. The last 5 years, I've devoted myself to trying to interpret why it doesn't save lives, and I've come to a different conclusion than most of the other physicians on the planet, which is that breast cancer spreads, if it's going to spread, will spread very early on, that there's a kind of breast cancer that becomes metastatic early on, and that which doesn't become metastatic over the course of its clinical time. The past year, I have written a book about it, 300 pages. It will be finished tomorrow on the train ride home. I got the first half proofread today, and the other half I'll do tomorrow coming home. Anyways, I thank the committee for inviting me to express my opinions.
Thank you.
Which are opinions. I mean, there's no facts here. There's scientific interpretation. There are facts, and there's the interpretation of them, and we all have our own way of interpreting data.
Thank you, Dr. Narrett. I'm sure you'll get a chance to expand upon it during the rounds of questions. Suite, Monsieur Simard pour...
Mr. Simard, you are next for 5 minutes. You have the floor. Welcome to the committee.
Merci. I would like to thank the committee for this opportunity to expose some of our work. I have been for 21 years the Canada Research Chair holder in cancer genetics, and I'm also fellow of the Royal Society of Canada. A screening program will be sustainable if it's deliver more benefit than harm and demonstrate value for money. It's feasible to implement, is accepted by both the users and the providers, and ensure equitable accessibility. Currently, breast screening program determine the eligibility based on age, primarily targeted women age 50 to 74 years with mammogram every 2 years. However, the risk of developing breast cancer vary a lot among women. There are no national guidelines for screening individuals deemed high risk. Screening protocols vary across jurisdiction, and the definition of high risk of developing breast cancer also vary across Canada. Typically, women are identified as high risk based on family history of breast cancer, followed by testing for BRCA1 and BRCA2 gene mutation. This identification process is often initiated ad hoc by the affected individual and their care provider, rather than through systemic population-based identification strategy. This approach overlooks women without a known family history, but with a significant genetic predisposition, and women at high risk due to the combination of other risk factors like the polygenic risk, lifestyle, hormonal factor, mammographic breast density. Polygenic risk score represent the combined effect of multiple genetic variants on cancer risk, identified through genome-wide association study, genomic approach, and provide a powerful risk prediction approach with the potential to identify many more individuals at high or low cancer risk than it is possible by screening based on age alone. In this regard, comprehensive risk prediction tools include both genetics and non-genetic risk factor have shown promise in providing personalized risk prediction and informing cancer screening strategy. A risk stratified program involves assessing the risk of breast cancer for each woman in the population, stratifying the population into several risk groups, assigning an individual to their respective risk group, and tailoring the screening strategy to each risk group. This approach may result in some women starting mammographic screening at younger age, have different screening interval, or have supplemental screening with another imaging modality, such as MRI. Additionally, women deemed to be high risk of breast cancer could be offered prophylactic preventative treatment. Evidence from simulation studies so far show that risk stratified screening allows for better trade-offs between benefits and harm. By focusing more intensive screening effort in high-risk individuals, it is possible to detect cancer earlier in this group while reducing unnecessary screening in low-risk populations. This targeted approach will potentially lead to earlier detection, improve outcome, and reduce overdiagnosis and overtreatment. Also, these studies have shown that risk stratified screening programs are more cost-effective than the current age-based screening, allowing more efficient use of resources with the healthcare system. Since 25 years, I'm the principal investigator of an international interdisciplinary team. In our last large-scale project called Personalized Risk Assessment for Prevention and Early Detection of Breast Cancer, Integration and Implementation, is the first study that will provide real-world evidence on the optimal implementation approaches within the Canadian healthcare system. Perspective I&I leverage resources available through the existing screening program, including infrastructure, data collection, methods, and analytical tools. This will enable seamless integration into the existing healthcare infrastructure and facilitate adoption into clinical practice. Then our project will inform collection of saliva sample and questionnaire-based risk information at population level, risk communication preference, psychological and emotional outcome following communication of breast cancer risk information, adherence to risk-based recommendation of screening, outcome of screening, cancer detection rate, false positive rate, stage of diagnosis using multifactorial risk level, and also the relative contribution of self-reported risk factor, mammographic density, and the polygenic risk score to breast cancer risk level estimate by the comprehensive CAN risk prediction tool. This assessment to strike the balance between the accuracy of risk assessment and the practicality of collecting this information at the population level. Identifying screening protocol that will optimize the cost effectiveness and benefit harm balance of risk stratified screening program. And we're also looking for a strategy to increase the healthcare organizational readiness to implement risk breast screening program. So far, we have learned that it's feasible to collect sample and data for risk estimation. More than 4,000 women participate in Ontario and Quebec in this real-world implementation study. Risk-based screening is acceptable to the woman and also to the healthcare provider using multifactorial risk level compared to age, family history, or brain density alone may provide more appropriate recommendation by reducing overscreening in those at average risk and increasing screening for those at higher risk. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Professor Simard. Next, Dr. Wilkinson, please. Welcome to the committee. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to this committee for your important work, especially today on the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. Very few people see the impact of breast cancer screening guidelines like I do. I'm a family doctor. I train future family doctors, and I'm a GP oncologist. I work on the cancer wards caring for patients who are too sick to be at home. I'm also a researcher. I work with Statistics Canada to understand the impacts of Canadian guidelines on breast cancer outcomes. I became a researcher almost accidentally because I could not understand why, as a family doctor, I was told not to screen women in their 40s, but as a GP oncologist, I was seeing so many women in their 40s and early 50s dying of cancer. If you walk a day in my shoes, you'll see what it's like to have to tell a woman in her 40s that she has incurable cancer. I talk with these women and their families. I sit with them. I walk them through the transition to palliative care. It's not something I forget. These women stay with me, as do their children and spouses who've journeyed alongside them. The Canadian Task Force on Preventive Health Care determines the recommendations for screening in Canada. In 2011, the task force recommended against screening women in their 40s. However, some provinces continued organizing screening programs and some did not, creating a natural experiment in our country. Together with Statistics Canada, Dr. Seeley and I used these differences in provincial screening practices to perform an audit of the impact of the task force guidelines. We reviewed more than 55,000 breast cancer cases over 7 years. We found the proportion of incurable or metastatic breast cancer increased by 10% in women in both their 40s and 50s after the guidelines changed in 2011. When we compared jurisdictions that screened with those that did not, we found that women in the 40s had significantly more advanced cancers and significantly lower survival than if there was no screening. We also saw a knock-on effect where women in their 50s had significantly more advanced cancers if they weren't screened in their 40s, and an overall increase in the total number of breast cancers in women in their 50s if they weren't screened in the 40s. I've also investigated the cost of breast cancer treatment and found that the cost of treating just one case of metastatic breast cancer is $500,000. Compare that to $68 for a mammogram. Working with Statistics Canada, we found that non-white women, that's Black, Indigenous, Chinese, South Asian, and Filipina, have a peak age of breast cancer diagnosis in the 40s, while white women have a peak age in the 60s. This means the majority of breast cancer cases in non-white women are diagnosed before screening even starts. Finally, we found that the incidence of breast cancer has increased rapidly in younger women over the last few years. Currently, I'm an expert for the evidence review team in the guideline update process. Our team creates the evidence base from which the task force makes their guidelines. We experts have recommended against using 40 to 60-year-old trials, which were performed in primarily white populations with primitive and now obsolete technologies. This aligns with what the U.S. Task Force did for their new guidelines. However, the Canadian Task Force dictated the inclusion of these outdated trials, thereby ensuring the guidelines would not change. We wrote to Minister Holland to demand that the evidence base be established independently. I remain skeptical that the new guidelines will change, as I feel this is a flawed process, with co-chairs who publicly state their bias against screening, place an overemphasis on harms, and have a limited openness to adjusting methodologies to embrace modern data. The U.S. and many of our provinces have recommended that women 40 to 49 be screened. However, family doctors deeply respect the task force guidelines and follow their edicts, even if they are contrary to what the patient in front of them wants. Until the task force recommends for screening women in their 40s, most family doctors in Canada will not advise their patients to be screened, even if there is a provincial screening program. My asks of the committee are as follows. Ensure the task force process is transparent and use inclusive, modern evidence. We cannot be basing our 2023 recommendations on trials from 1963. Ensure that the experts can vote and that there is oversight so individual biases cannot drive the outcome of the process. And, in the longer term, develop a guideline process which is responsive to new evidence with scheduled frequent reviews and a mechanism to evaluate the effectiveness of guidelines once they are in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilkinson. Next, we're going to hear from Dense Breast Canada, Ms. Dale and Dr. Gordon, and I understand you have a joint statement, so you have 5 minutes to use as you will. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Paula Gordon, and I'll start. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'm a breast radiologist, and I've been in practice for over 40 years, reading mammograms and ultrasounds, doing needle biopsies and other breast procedures. I've volunteered with Jenny Dale and Dense Breast Canada for 7 years as their medical advisor, advocating for optimal breast cancer screening. Breast cancer is common. 1 in 8 Canadian women will be diagnosed with breast cancer during her lifetime. Mammograms are low-dose x-rays of the breasts, which allow us to detect cancers earlier before there are symptoms. Breast cancer treatments are less intensive and outcomes are better when cancers are diagnosed at an early stage. The 5-year survival rate for stage 1 breast cancer is 99%, but it's only 22% for stage 4. Some breasts have more normal glandular tissue than fat, and we call them dense breasts. These people have a higher risk of getting cancer, and mammograms are less effective at finding their cancers. They benefit from supplemental imaging, typically with ultrasound or MRI based on the patient's risk. The current task force guidelines recommend against screening women younger than 50 and older than 74, against additional screening for people with dense breasts, and against doing breast self-exams. Experts disagree with the guidelines, which were created using a flawed process. The same process has impaired other guidelines on women's health. The Canadian Task Force is an arm's-length body with no accountability and no requirement to monitor the impact of their guidelines. In the past, the task force has intentionally excluded subject matter experts from their guidelines panels. Without expert input, the task force based recommendations on decades-old trials that included almost exclusively white women, so they discriminate against racialized women. The guidelines discriminate against women with dense breasts and against women older than 74, who have the highest mortality from breast cancer. The guidelines have led to inequity of access among provinces. A Canadian woman's access to early detection of breast cancer should not depend on where she lives. The panel for 2024 update includes family doctors, a nurse practitioner, a gastroenterologist, and a kidney specialist. For the first time, 4 experts are included. However, the task force methods manual states that clinical and content experts do not provide input or vote on the strength or direction of the recommendations. To ensure that Canadian women have access to equitable and optimal breast screening, we ask that the guideline process be reformed to ensure appropriate oversight, use of current research, and meaningful input from experts. Jenny.
I'm Jenny Dale. I'm a breast cancer patient, and in 2016, I co-founded Dense Breast Canada, a nonprofit raising awareness and advocating for optimal breast cancer screening. I've spoken with hundreds of breast cancer patients across Canada, and it's an honor to be here tonight to represent them. I could spend hours telling you about the damage the current breast screening guidelines are doing. I could tell you about Jennifer and Carolyn in the committee room tonight. Both were diagnosed with later stage breast cancer after not being given access to screening in their 40s because of the current guidelines. Instead of lumpectomy and radiation, they were subjected to aggressive treatment, mastectomy, chemotherapy, and lymph node dissection. I could tell you how they both missed critical years of work, how their families worried they would lose them, how they worry now about metastases. I could tell you that they live with lingering pain and debilitating side effects, and I could tell you that the task force members who create these guidelines believe that all of these are acceptable costs for Jennifer and Carolyn to pay in the name of not screening. I could also tell you that if Jennifer and Carolyn lived in BC, Nova Scotia, PEI, or the Yukon, they could have self-referred for mammograms in the 40s and been spared much of what they've gone through. I could tell you that even though current research shows clear benefits to early detection, members of the task force don't believe that earlier screening results in better outcomes for enough women. Instead, they cling to the flawed findings of 40 to 60-year-old studies like the CNBSS that have now been discredited. I could tell you more, but the one message I want to leave with you is that the current guidelines are harming Canadians and causing avoidable deaths. The very guidelines that everyone would expect to protect Canadians are doing the opposite. The task force is denying us the opportunity to access preventive health care that results in better outcomes. Their overstatement of harms and understatement of benefits is not based on modern science. Their paternalistic concerns of the anxiety caused by screening are not borne out by patients' lived experiences. Their insistence on shared decision-making perpetuates power imbalances between doctor and patient. And finally, the task force's dismissal of the impact of the guidelines on patients' quality of life is reductive at best and callous at worst. Please bring Canada into the modern era by using relevant, current, and inclusive evidence. Don't allow a group of biased, non-subject matter experts to continue to destroy Canadians' lives by denying us health care. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dale and Dr. Gordon. We're now going to begin rounds of questions, starting with the Conservatives. Ms. Vecchio, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Ms. Dale, I want to begin with you because one of the first things I see here is a note that you opined that the Trudeau government had broken its promise to update the screening guidelines for breast cancer. I just want to hear a little bit from you on that. Can you provide to me why you believe that they broke that promise?
That commitment was made during an election campaign that the government would address better guidelines. And after the election, they did not address the guidelines. It was not until this past June that that commitment was fulfilled, and it was fulfilled.
Well, I usually do not try to get political on health issues of women because I think this is really important. But this government has said that they're going to be doing a gender-based analysis on everything that they're supposed to be doing. So I'm extremely concerned that we're hearing about the discrepancies. I would like to speak to you, Ms. Wilkinson, on this because you're talking about the fact that we see gender gaps. So for people who are not non-white, we're looking in their 40s. For people who are white, we're looking up in their 60s. We're also talking about the regional disparities as well. Can you please share a little bit more on that? Because I hear you loud and clear. We obviously need to do something because women are dying and we know that there is disparities there. What would you like to see this government do and how can we assure that women survive greater? Thank you.
So I think that what you're referring to is the inequities that we're seeing, and these inequities are driven by these guidelines. So the inequities that are created by the task force guidelines happen on so many levels. They happen on a provincial level because they create differences in provinces. Some provinces have the resources to create their own programs, some don't. They create inequities in terms of patient level because when the task force says don't screen, family doctors really listen, and the College of Family Doctors really pushes that mandate. And so patients really have to know to advocate for themselves. So having these national guidelines really drives inequity between individuals, between particularly individuals who are marginalized, who are Black, who have worse outcomes with breast cancer, who are lower socioeconomic status, which we see with lung cancer, because these guidelines also refer to many different areas of preventative care, including lung cancer screening. So what would I like to see? Although healthcare is a provincial matter, these national guidelines really drive what the provinces do. And until we have a clear and transparent mechanism for creating guidelines that include modern, relevant evidence, we're going to continue to be, as a country, behind the 8 ball, dragged back to really old data and not moving forward in an innovative fashion.
I want to continue with you because you talked about the screening being done under the age of 50 because of that 40 age. I'm a happy 52-year-old woman, but you look at that. What would you say is the best way of screening? Does it start off with a mammogram? Do we do biopsies? What is that procedure? If a woman is concerned, or if she's in that 40s and we're looking at screening, what should that protocol be to ensure that we're doing right health?
So it's really simple, really. Mammogram is where we start with screening. A mammogram is an X-ray of the breast. And what I and many other experts believe is that screening should start at age 40. That probably women in their 40s should have annual mammograms, and then that should continue every 2 years. And if a woman is really healthy and has a good life expectancy and in her 70s, then that should continue probably till 80. The biopsies, those kinds of things, those are only things that come into play if there are abnormalities or suspicions of cancer noted on mammogram.
Oh, wonderful. I have 2 more minutes. Continuing on with that, when we talk about genetics, because genetics is obviously a big part of this, and I think I've heard that from each of the panelists today. So Dr. Noorad, I wanted to start with you, and we talk about genetics and screening. When we're looking at that, when should we start doing the proper screening if we know that breast cancer is in a family's history?
Well, there are 3 levels of genetics. One, as Dr. Simard pointed out, with polygenic risk scores, which give you a risk based on 313 variants, which is his study. Then there are major genes, BRCA1, BRCA2, PALB2, Jacques and I were actually working on that together back in 1980s. And then there are family history.
So should we be doing that at a certain age when a woman is 20, 30, 40? Is there a certain age that we should start doing a special screening for women with history?
It's not so much we should do the screenings, we should do the testing. One of the most important things I believe is the current policy in Ontario and most provinces is that we do genetic testing once a woman's developed breast or ovarian cancer. By that time, I think it's a little late. I mean, I set up a program at Women's College Hospital, the only one in the world, where we make genetic testing available to every woman in Canada from the age of 18 on a pay-per-service basis. We've done several thousand. The premise is that if we find them before they have cancer, then we can offer them special screening. And in the high-risk women, we do offer MRIs. It's covered by the Ontario government, OPSP. We offer preventive surgery. We offer mammography as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Narad. I believe my time is up. I really appreciate that.
It is indeed. Thank you. Next, Dr. Bennett, please, for 6 minutes.
Thanks very much to everyone. And I just have to say that in a study on women's health, I hope that we will be able to move more broadly than in terms of the social determinants, but also women's responsibility as the healthcare provider for their families, and the fact that we actually do need, I think, to look at the big picture. And so I'd like to ask Dr. Narad from Women's College, that one of the things I think in women's health research was listening to women about what's worrying them. And I think at the beginning it was women worried that their sisters or their nieces or their daughters were going to get breast cancer. And I think that obviously the discovery of the BRCA gene has been very important. So I would like you to tell us what you think the future would be in terms of cancer genetics and prevention, testing versus screening, and how that could eventually move to treatment with precision medicine.
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. I've been working on prevention. I've been working on screening. I've been working on treatment over the last 25 years. Was co-discoverer of BRCA1 and BRCA2. Spent a lot of time thinking. You know, in 1991, when we did the first paper in the Lancet, BRCA1, I thought by the time we got to 2023, we'd have something better to offer than removing the breasts. So far, we haven't. We just published a paper on using tamoxifen in several thousand women with BRCA1 mutations, reduced the risk by about 20%. Not really good enough. Prevention, could talk about all day. I'm not one who would think that we can tackle the breast cancer problem to a large extent in Canada by current preventive means. We recommend against alcohol, we recommend against obesity, etc., weight loss. Interestingly, for women under 40, being overweight protective. No one ever talks about that, but it's very strongly protective. And so treatment, I would, having worked in all three areas for 30 years, I would emphasize treatment. I think so. I mean, it's a matter of funding. I think in terms of prevention, we have an idea of, well, how we think we can do it, but it hasn't been received funding yet. I mean, I think a lot of the points made by the other speakers are valid. I do say, though, our study, the endpoint was death. There was 500 deaths in one group and 505 deaths in the other group. I applaud Dr. Simard for his effort in trying to change it, but his study doesn't have death as the endpoint. None of the other studies have death at the endpoint. You show me, Dr. Simard, that your program reduces the number of deaths, and I will be a convert to your program. Interestingly, though, Dr. Simard, friends of him forever, and, he's recommending a risk-based study rather than age-based study. Really interesting. So currently the age base is 50 to 70. If we reduce the age base to 40 rather than 50, then polygenic risk scores kind of go out the window, because even those people with a high risk score, the recommendation would be to start screening at 40 rather than 50. Now, I heard all these things that outdated data for the National Breast Cancer. Yeah, it's outdated, but there were still 170 women that had breast cancer identified that are still alive. It doesn't mean you show me the current data. My understanding, and having read every paper about it, I don't see any current data that supports use of mammography to the extent to which the panel thinks it does. One can talk about anecdotally about, this and that. The only other study which is always neglected to be mentioned is a UK age study done by Stephen Duffy and colleagues, which was published in 2022, which showed that randomized screening in UK, women started at age 40 versus age 50, and we followed them till death to age 60, had no difference on the mortality rate age 60. But you will never see that paper cited. And that paper was cited, it was written in 2020, and I've been communicating with Dr. Duffy, and he actually gave me the information. You will never see the UK age study, which actually showed screening from age 40 was exactly the same outcome as screening from age 50.
You found that there were some mutations in the ethnically diverse populations. Do you think that mutation, do you think that will affect the way that different cancers or different patients are treated?
The mutations?
If it's a mutated cancer,
yes,
I mean, once you find that the genetics is different,
these are good questions. They're not really about screening, but you have 100% right. I'm running an international study of 8,000 women with the BRCA1 mutation, collecting comprehensive information on their treatment. Dr. Simard published a paper 2 weeks ago in JNCI, which looked at BRCA1 and BRCA2 patients in 2,500 women from many countries, including Canada. So we're studying that. We do see that the treatments have different effects. Certainly. Nevertheless, I do believe preventing it is better than treating it. The best we can do with treatment, my goal as a physician working to cure breast cancer is to get the mortality rate, the survival rate to 90%. My goal as a preventive physician working in the screening, and that is to get the survival to 100%.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Next, suite, Madame Larouche, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
You have 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. It's very interesting to hear you this evening. I think several of us have known people who have been affected by breast cancer. And I'd like to take a moment to think of a friend who was diagnosed with breast cancer several years ago, and she was in her late 40s, and she died a few years later in her early 50s. So, Natalie, this is for you. But I think several of us have been affected by this cancer, which affects far too many women and which takes away from us women at far too young an age. So, back to this whole issue of screening and treatment. Mr. Nerad, it's interesting, Dr. Nerad, you talked about a UK study. So, my colleagues have asked a lot of questions about age and national guidelines. But what's happening internationally, Dr. Nerad? You talked about Great Britain. And Dr. Simard, you said that you were part of an international group, an international research group. So if there's anything that you'd like to add, what can we learn from what's happening internationally? And in your brief, Ms. Gordon, you talked about statistics and data, Dr. Gordon, coming from other countries. How do these studies being done elsewhere contribute to what we can have here as proposals? Well, I have the good fortune of being part of an international consortium which pools data from 400,000 women in over 35 countries on 6 continents. Thanks to these participants, we have been able to develop new risk assessment tools, which we call polygenic risk assessments, or scores. These were studied in a dozen prospective studies. It's important to understand that we could say that roughly 1 every 200 or 300 women has as a rare predisposing gene. Some ethnic groups have a higher frequency of genes, for example, BRCA. I participated in discovering it, but these are fairly rare. What we're talking about here is about 300 markers, which are very frequent. With that signature, when you combine that with the other risk factors, breast density, hormone risk factors, certain lifestyle factors, in that way, we can assess personal risk and group people into 3 groups. In our study of nearly 4,000 women, 80% of women had a risk nearly equal to the general population. 15% had an intermediate level risk, so they should begin annual mammograms at 40. And 5% have high risk, for whom we would recommend beginning mammograms and having MRI imaging as well. So not just mammograms. Now, you're familiar with the statistics. You know them better than I do. There's a certain proportion of cancers that are going to be diagnosed before age 50. Internationally, we also work to have risk prediction models or genomic models and tools that are specific for the various nationalities, Asian, Hispanic, for example. And this is also very important. Thank you. I was going to ask you to, Dr. Gordon.
Thank you very much. I'd like the committee to know how futuristic and wonderful Dr. Simard's work is, but it is futuristic. And certainly Dr. Narod's discovery of the breast cancer gene was pivotal. But we're dealing with guidelines now that deal with average risk women. Only 5% of women are high risk. And the vast majority of women who get breast cancer, have no risk factors, not even a mother with breast cancer. In fact, having dense breasts is the most prevalent risk factor. What the committee should understand, and I'm sorry to hear that Dr. Narod does not know this, but the study with which he was associated, the Canadian National Breast Screening Study, has been discredited. Although it was supposed to be a randomized trial, the randomization was flawed, corrupt, you could say, and it explains why that study was the only randomized trial among 8 others that did not show mortality reduction. We know why that study didn't show reduced deaths among women in the mammogram group. So for average risk women, they should have a risk assessment. Right now, not all women can have the polygenic risk score that Dr. Simard spoke so well about, but women should be assessed for their risk. There are online risk tools that are free and easy to use, and average risk women should start at age 40. If a woman's shown to be at increased risk or very high risk, she might start sooner, but otherwise age 40, and ideally annually, because when women are premenopausal, the hormones made by their ovaries cause their breast cancers to grow faster. That's why we must start screening women, and especially Black, Asian, Hispanic women, Indigenous women, in fact, have the same analogous inequities as we see in Black American women. They tend to get more aggressive cancers, and they're more likely to die from their cancers. So those inequities have to be addressed. And the other big inequity is for women with dense breasts. Now, that's something that no one can control. You can't control your breast density, and yet women with dense breasts are more likely to get cancer, and we have a harder time seeing those cancers on their mammograms. We know we can find them. We can find them with ultrasound. If they're really high risk, we can find them with MRI, but of course MRI is much more expensive and less accessible. And it's not their fault that they were born, they have dense breasts. They deserve the same opportunity for early detection as women with non-dense breasts.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. That's our time for this round. Next, I recognize Mr. Davies, please, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here. Dr. Gordon, I'd like you to elaborate, please, on why breast screening guidelines, in your view, need to use inclusive and more modern evidence.
Thank you for asking that question. As you heard from Dr. Wilkinson, the Canadian Task Force procedures to this point have focused on rating the quality of evidence, if you will, and randomized controlled trials are always ranked the highest. The problem is the randomized trials were all done between the 60s and the 80s at a time when mammograms were done on X-ray film that you put on the light box. They're now done digitally, and we look at the images on a computer screen. They're much more accurate. We can use software, in fact, to help us decide whether a woman has dense breasts or not. The old trials were done, as you heard, in white populations, and so the guidelines discriminate against racialized women. Now, some people say, well, why don't you just do another randomized trial? Well, because those old trials, and even the flawed trials, proved that mammograms save lives, it would be unethical to repeat them where you expect women to go in a control group where they're not having any screening. The newer observational studies, and the one this committee needs to hear about, is one called the Pan-Canadian Study, published in 2014, ignored by our task force, where they looked at 2.8 million women having screening mammograms in our provincial screening programs, and they showed that overall, women who have mammograms are 40% less likely to die than women who don't, and it's even better for women in the 40s. They're 44% less likely to die. But the task force continues to use this old data, claiming that the randomized trials trump this newer, modern observational data. We have a natural experiment in the country, which you heard about from Dr. Wilkinson. Women who live in provinces that screen starting at 40 are more likely to be diagnosed with early stage breast cancer than in women who live in provinces that start at age 50, and they have better survival. Women who live in provinces that don't screen till 50, the women in the 40s are diagnosed more often with late stage cancers, even than women in the same province in their 50s. So this is the outcome, and our task force has never audited the outcome of their current guidelines. The current guidelines are from 2018, but they're essentially unchanged since 2011. So Dr. Wilkinson and colleagues with Statistics Canada were able to show the damage done by those guidelines. And yet, from what we can see, the current review underway is likely to come up with a recommendation for no change in those guidelines.
Now, Dr. Gordon, one of the concerns I've heard expressed is one of potential bias. In May 2023, before the expedited review of the current guidelines had even started, Dr. Guylaine Thériault, co-chair of the Canadian Task Force on Preventative Healthcare, told the Toronto Star that she does not see any reason to change the task force's guidelines on breast screening, which is to keep it at the current age of 50. In addition, just this month, Dr. Thériault co-authored a journal article called Debunking Myths About Screening. As a scientist and a researcher and someone involved in this, what kind of confidence or lack of confidence does this give you that Dr. Thériault was able to fairly adjudicate based on the evidence?
Well, she's clearly declared her bias and her conclusion. You might be interested in hearing that in that article called Debunking Myths About Screening, she claimed that earlier detection does not result in better outcomes. She said that's a myth. She said it's a myth that newer technologies produce more benefits, and that it's a myth that screening saves lives. I just told you from the Pan-Canadian Study, we know that there's 40% fewer deaths in women who have mammograms.
States has recently lowered the screening age to 40, is that right?
Yes, and that's what's prompted this conversation. I mean, normally the task force reissues their guidelines. Well, the last couple have been every 7 years. And this has to be something, research is being churned out very quickly, and these guidelines have to be more nimble. They have to be able to be changed more frequently when there's more research done.
Dr. Wilkinson, to your understanding, why did the U.S. change their guideline lowering the screening age from 50 to 40?
So what the U.S. did was they assumed benefit of screening. So they did not review evidence before 2016. They moved on. They found no new randomized controlled trials, much like we spoke to, that these trials are all primarily done a long time ago. So they assumed benefit, and they had to look at other things. So they looked at some non-randomized trials, and also they looked at some modeling data, because we know that we cannot rely on the old trials. The old trials were done before digital mammography. They were done before even tamoxifen existed. We are talking very rudimentary treatment. And so the benefit of these old trials only shows a mortality benefit of 15% compared to the 40% or 44% that we're hearing. The other thing that the U.S. looked at was they looked at the impact on minority groups, on the younger age at diagnosis for Black women, for Asian women. And so based on the increasing incidence, the change in the different age of diagnosis and the modeling data, that's what prompted the change.
Thank you, Dr. Wilkinson. Sorry, Mr. Davies, that's your time. And Ms. Roberts, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to just state a quote that I found on the Public Health Agency of Canada. Breast cancer death rates peaked in 1986 and have declined since. However, there has been a reduction in death rates due to the impact of screening and improvements in treatment for breast cancer, according to the Public Health Agency of Canada. So my question is going to be to you, Dr. Anna. I love your name. You have been a supporter of organized screening for women under the age of 50, noting that, and this is your quote, there is a significant increase in survival for women if they live in a province where an organized screening program with self-referral and annual recall for women in their 40s. You also mentioned that a 16% of breast cancer occurs in women between 40 and 50 of age. Can you please help us understand the importance of screening? I know that you're an advocate of it, and I really appreciate that as a woman, because I think that we need to make sure that women deserve to live and deserve to have this screening, because without us, they wouldn't be here. Let's be honest, okay? So could you please, I mean, I really love what you're saying, and I love what is it Dr. Gordon as well? Dr. Gordon is saying. I think you guys are on the same path. So if you could please elaborate on why we can save more women if we implement more screening at an earlier age.
Absolutely. So what screening does is it diagnoses cancers earlier. So screen-detected cancers are often only 4 millimeters. They're cancers that are detected before you can feel them. And smaller cancers, by definition, are earlier stage, and earlier stage cancers, by definition, have better outcomes and less intensive treatments. In terms of why an organized program, so if that screening happens within an organized program, that means that a woman can self-refer, which is key in this day and age where a lot of women do not have access to a family doctor, or where a family doctor may be a barrier to screening because the family doctor is hearing that the task force says don't screen. So the woman comes and says, can I be screened? And the doctor says, you don't need to be. Women in organized programs get recalls. We're all busy. Life gets a hold of you. The program sends you a letter and says, oh, remember to come for your mammogram this year. And there are quality controls within organized screening programs as well. There are metrics that are followed in terms of quality of mammograms, reading, follow-up, all of those issues. And that's why organized programs are so key. And with our current national guidelines, there are not organized programs for women in their 40s across the country. It is completely dependent on the province you live in.
I want to, first of all, I forgot to mention this earlier, but I want to thank you for sitting with patients, because I've done it as a volunteer in a long-term care home, and it really makes a difference to the patient. So thank you for doing that. So my other question is to you or Dr. Gordon. Do we need to do a study on the creation of guidelines by the Canadian Task Force on Preventing Health for Women so that we can start fresh by discovering, hey, you know what? We can save more women. Maybe we need to start now and start doing it on all women, regardless of race.
So our task force has been looked at as the gold standard. But I ask you, why is it the gold standard if experts don't agree with the guidelines? And why is it the gold standard if provinces are doing their own thing and not doing what the guidelines are saying? And the reach of the task force and their guidelines is very broad and hits many points of women's health. It includes lung cancer screening. It includes cervical screening. The last time the cervical cancer guidelines were updated was 10 years ago. In the interim, the whole world has moved to HPV-based screening. That's where we should be. We are handcuffed back 10 years ago to where those guidelines are. There are other examples of guidelines. Our guidelines tell us not to screen for postpartum depression. We are one of the only countries in the world that suggests that. So there are many, many issues with guidelines across.
Well, I just quickly want to thank you and Dr. Gordon, because I think that you do us justice to women. So thank you for making sure that you protect us, because there's not too many.
Can I jump in and build on what?
Absolutely,
Sorry, can I jump
go
in?
right ahead.
No, I'm
build on what
afraid you
Dr.
can't,
Wilkinson
Dr.
has
Gordon.
said.
We're at time. If Ms. Atwin wants to give you some of her time, that's up to her. But now the floor is for Ms. Atwin for the next 5 minutes.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, our witnesses, for being with us this evening. Even just this evening, I've learned so much, to be honest, and I didn't realize how many different veins my mind would be going with this kind of a conversation. I think about conversations I've had with my mother about getting tested and maybe the unpleasantness around getting a mammogram, but how important it is, and also kind of the general sentiment. My circle of friends, we're all entering that stage where we should be looking at getting screening, but also the importance of self-checking. But I also see in the 2018 guidelines that they're actually recommending against the practice of breast self-examination for screening for breast cancer. There's a few other concerning things in the 2018 guidelines, but there's also pieces about the potential for false positives or overdiagnosis, which has very much piqued my curiosity. I've never been, warned about the potential risks there. So any one of our witnesses, if you'd like to jump in on that piece, if you could just clarify for me, what are the risks for overdiagnosis or false positives?
Paula, maybe you'd like to go since
I'm happy to do that, yes. So first of all, even the term false positive is pejorative. It's really fear-mongering, because we're not telling women you have cancer when you don't. What they use the term false positive to mean is a false alarm. Something showed up on your mammogram. At the end of the day, it's probably not going to be cancer, but it deserves another look. And so women who have anything that's out of place, that needs a little more testing, sometimes just another couple of mammogram pictures, for example, they are recalled. And that's what it should be, a recall or a false alarm. The majority of women, we can sort it out just with ultrasounds or mammograms. If you take the real numbers in this country, out of every 1,000 women that are screened, 70 women will be recalled. And of those 70, 11 of them, so now we're talking 11 out of the 1,000, will be told that they should have a needle biopsy. I must tell you, a needle biopsy is done with adequate local freezing, and most women say it's no more uncomfortable than a blood test from the arm. I know nobody believes me when I say that, but the best comment I ever heard from a patient was, Dr. Gordon, I have shoes that are more uncomfortable than this test. In any case, out of the 11 who have a needle biopsy, 4 of them are told that they have cancer. So for 11 women, going through this test, and the task force calls them unnecessary tests. Well, it's not an unnecessary test until you find the answer. And most women would rather go through something relatively painless to be more sure that they don't have cancer. So that's the false alarm story. Overdiagnosis is a little tougher to explain. Overdiagnosis is when we find a cancer, and it's a real cancer, but that cancer would not have killed the patient had it been left untreated. So the typical scenario is if you're dealing with an elderly woman and we find a small cancer, maybe it's not going to be problematic for 5 or 10 years. And she's got lung cancer because she's older and she's at higher risk for lung cancer. And that lung cancer is going to kill her before her breast cancer would. The problem is, another example, okay, woman gets diagnosed with cancer, she gets treated, she finishes all her treatment, and 2 weeks later she gets hit by a car and dies. That's actually overdiagnosis because that cancer wasn't going to kill her. But unless you have a crystal ball and you know that you're not going to have a fatal heart attack or be hit by a car, every woman with a new diagnosis of cancer is offered treatment. Now, it's estimating overdiagnosis that's tricky. And the task force used an estimate of 48%. They said almost half of cancers are overdiagnosed, meaning they shouldn't have been found or treated. That's because they got those data from that flawed Canadian trial that we heard about from Dr. Narod. That's why there was no difference in the death rate. And so all their stats are off. International experts believe that overdiagnosis occurs in about 1 to 10% of women, and probably at the lower end of that range. Now, remember, these are real cancers. It's just a question of, is that cancer going to kill the woman? And most importantly, our task force is using overdiagnosis as a reason to not screen women in the 40s. Well, women in the 40s are much less likely to have a competing cause of death. And overdiagnosis in that age group is negligible. So it's absolutely not a reason to not screen women. When it comes to false alarms, we should be telling women not only about overdiagnosis and false alarms, let them know there's a possibility they'll be recalled, and mostly they turn out to be nothing. But it's condescending for the task force to decide on behalf of women that they're too fragile to handle a little transient anxiety. Women should be able to decide for themselves. And if they say, no, it would ruin my life, I'd rather risk getting cancer, that's the woman's choice. But most women, when they understand the principles of overdiagnosis and false alarms, would like to be screened.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. Suite, Madame Larouche pour 2 minutes.
And now Madame Larouche for 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to piggyback on what my colleague Jenica has just asked. A lot of questions have been asked since the beginning of the committee on prevention and how to prevent these cancers. One of the counter-arguments is the very existence of these false positives or overdiagnoses are occurring. Now, you've explained the difference between a false positive and an overdiagnosis. Dr. Gordon, before Ms. Adwin's time was up, you began to discuss this, but what are the real risks of overdiagnosis? Is this beyond the fact that there could be some impacts on the woman's mental health? Are these the side effects of treatment, or is it because specialists or doctors could have been used for other purposes that are now being used for this? What are the criticisms of overdiagnosis, and what are the true risks to women other than mental health issue? If you'd like to elaborate on that, you could as well.
We don't know at the time we diagnose a cancer whether it is overdiagnosed, because we don't know yet when that woman is going to die. Now, you could argue, for example, and you heard this earlier, if a woman is in good health and she has a life expectancy of at least 7 to 10 years, we should keep screening her. It's when women are ill with other potentially deadly illnesses that they can stop having mammograms. If they have end-stage heart disease, end-stage renal failure, and they're not likely to live 10 more years, then let's not go looking for a cancer that will not be threatening to them before their other illness will kill them. So it's a question of judging. There's no harm in diagnosis. It's not taking away, because of course we don't know when that woman deserves treatment because she might live another 20 or 30 years, but it's more a question of judgment as to when to stop screening. So the screening programs currently, many of them stop at age 74, and if a woman wants to continue screening, she needs a requisition from her doctor, and there's several provinces that allow women to keep self-referring, but that assumes that they're in good health with a reasonable life expectancy.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. Next, Mr. Davies, please, for 2.5 minutes.
Dr. Gordon, I want to make sure I have this right. The current task force has recommended against screening until women are 50 for about the last 10 years. And the criticisms of this, if I am hearing the evidence, are the following. They're basing that on outdated evidence being used, the diminishment or ignoring of current evidence, a lack of expert input or subject matter expertise, potential bias of task force members. Would that be an accurate summary of the concerns?
That sums it up.
Okay. Now, Dr. Wilkinson, you've mentioned the need for transparent processes. Can you elaborate on your experience as a member of the Evidence Review Committee?
Sure. I can only elaborate on what I've experienced, but certainly I've not seen transparency to date. So our recommendation was to not use old data as the expert. However, during the time that we were trying to establish the evidence base, it seemed that the working group was already working on evidence, although I don't know where it came from since we had not completed our review. When we went to sort of finalize things, and there was all of the old data included in the evidence, we were told this was because the task force had demanded that this evidence be included. When I asked where the overdiagnosis number is coming from, because this is a key number. If you say, as we said earlier, the overdiagnosis rate is 50%, what that means is if you're using an old trial with a benefit of 15% and you say 50% of those don't matter, you're down to 7%. If you take the newer trials at 50% and you say, or 40% benefit and you say zero overdiagnosis, you've got a 40% benefit. So the evidence review panel did not know where that number came from. That is not a number that they were supplying to the task force working group.
Thanks. Ms. Dale, I just want you to jump in a little bit. You have talked about the current patchwork of breast screening practices across the country. How does that impact Canadian women's ability to get the care they need?
Well, thanks for the question. It impacts it significantly. We look at provinces. We compare, Dense Breast Canada compares all the provinces in terms of optimal breast cancer practices. And we looked at 5 different key practices. And you have a province like Quebec that scores 0 out of 5. And you have a province like Nova Scotia that scores 5. And then you have most of them score 2 out of 5. And that means that women in a province like Quebec do not have equal access to finding cancer early. It's a postal code lottery. And so we want to see all women in Canada have the same access for that. And even in provinces, we found that even in provinces that do self-refer at 40, there is still, the family doctors are still dissuading women from getting screened. The task force guidelines are still playing a key role regardless of self-referral. And we're also finding with this inequality, like there's confusion across the country. We did a survey of 2,500 women, and 42% of them did not know what age screening began in their province. Okay. And so beyond the confusion, we've also got women are on social media all the time.
Yep. Thank you, Ms. Dale. I'll let you go a little longer because it was, I think, it's the first question you got on this panel, but we're well over time. Dr. Kitchen is next for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all of you for being here, and also the witness, or basically the people in the audience here as well, and commending them for being here. Part of my discussion and my concern is that there are people watching. There are women watching this conversation, and they're concerned, and they are very concerned about what's going on, about themselves and the future for women in this country. And so it's great to hear many different aspects of this. I recognize the challenges that we've had, and I've been all over the map on what questions I want to ask. Ultimately, I recognize the challenges that we have in doing RCTs in this subject area and the potential that could be there and someone designing that. And Dr. Wilkinson, your comments about working with patients, I think is tremendous, and dealing with women and understanding that. And in my years of practice, and from a rural part of Canada where I had many women come to me with signs and symptoms that were outside my scope of practice. But they came to me because they realized that I would at least refer them to where I felt it was appropriate to at least be assessed. And I'm basically, my home is 14 miles from North Dakota. And North Dakota, they basically have 18-wheelers with mammograms traveling all over the state and doing testing for there. And so when I see the recommendations from the U.S. where they're recommending biannual testing for women between 40 and 74, I see that as a concern as to the research that the science that they would have used to get that. And so, Dr. Wilkinson, just your thoughts on that as to if they had some research to support that, why don't we?
That's a very good question. And that's the crux of the matter, I think. We need to move beyond the old data. We need to move beyond 60-year-old data. We cannot be using data from before we landed on the moon to determine our breast cancer guidelines now. And we're moving into our uncharted territories. I think I'm not a methodologist. I'm not a guideline expert. I'm not going to pretend I know how to do this, but I do think we have to think about different methodologies to involve different kinds of data. And right now, although different data is involved, if it's an RCT, even if it's a really old, crappy RCT, it still trumps a non-randomized study. And so those numbers from those randomized studies are still driving. So there needs to be, I think we need to look to what the U.S. is doing. I think we need to use modeling data. There's a new paper that's just out that shows that screening women in the 40s saves 3.3 deaths per 1,000 women screened. So I think moving to modeling, I think using a lot of the epidemiological data because our society is changing, the incidence is changing, and the ethnic makeup of our society is changing. So we have to be doing more of a holistic investigation to do that.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And you know, when we hear about guidelines that are basically suggesting that they're against self-screening, and that's a concern to me, especially in rural areas where, and not just rural, it's urban as well, where there's concerns about where you can't access a practitioner to even get that done. But at least the self-screening would provide some form of understanding, and I think that's information that women need to understand and be prepared to A, learn how to do it, and B, do it such that to at least have them understand when they need to see that practitioner. So on that note, the concern I have then is, having been a regulator in the profession and dealing with things, there is a difference between guidelines and standards. And when we're talking about guidelines that are being presented, where practitioners see those guidelines, they don't necessarily look at it the same way as they might look at standards. And I'm just wondering comments that you might have as to maybe these things should be even farther than the guidelines and become standards.
I think guidelines would be a really good start. I think we need something. I think we have an opportunity and I think the national guidelines are a federal issue because they're impacting all the outcomes in the province. But we have an opportunity to do this differently, to be creative, to think about what is the impact of what we're doing. For example, in the U.S., when they recommended against prostate screening or PSA screening, they looked at their mortality rates, found they were going up, and reinstituted it. Whereas we made that recommendation 10 years ago, and I don't think we've ever looked back at that. I mean, it's not a women's health issue, but it's an example of the broader reach. So I think, although standards would be lovely, I think we need to start first with really grounded guidelines, and we need to really have regular updates of guidelines given the quick pace of medical literature change these days.
Thank you, Dr. Wilkinson. Next, Dr. Pawlowski, please, for 5 minutes.
I hate to bring this up and get into this controversy, but Dr. Gordon, I think you suggested that the current task force recommendations on screening were largely based on Dr. Narod's randomized control trial, which I think you've said are flawed. And as I recall having discussed this with you before, the basis of the flaw was the improper randomization. In that at least some of the nurse practitioners who were involved and doing the randomizing, when in the screening exam they felt a lump, then they put them in the mammography group. And so, yes, at the end, you are going to have more deaths in that group because you had a lot of people in that group who were in there because they had cancer to begin with. So that gave a skewed outcome. Am I right that is what you're saying, and what evidence do you have that in fact that is what happened?
That is what we're saying. And in fact, there were 28 former staff who came forward with evidence of protocol deviations, they're called. And that wasn't the only problem with the Canadian trial. In fact, they allowed women to be participants even if they had a known breast lump. And when you do screening is for women with no lumps. So first of all, they allowed these women to participate. They were having trouble recruiting enough women for the study, and they actually approached breast surgeons to send patients to be in the study. And the reason a woman goes to a breast surgeon is because she has a lump or a symptom. So they, first of all, allowed these women to participate. What was supposed to happen is that every woman who came to participate, these were volunteers, they got a clinical breast exam by a highly trained nurse. And then they would go to the coordinator who would decide who would put her in either the study group where they got a mammogram or the control group where they didn't. Now, nowadays, when we do these studies, the randomization's done by central office by computer. In those days, the coordinators had a piece of paper in front of them with lines, and the lines would say mammogram control, mammogram, 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 control, control. And at the end of the sheet, you'd have an equal number of women in both arms. What we know happened because witnesses came forward and told us, and these are in 3 peer-reviewed published papers, by the way, that the nurses would say, this lady has to be in the mammogram group. And so the coordinator could write her name on the next available mammogram line, and then other women who came in later in the day could go in any blank lines that she had left. So there didn't even have to make any erasures. This was actually picked up in 1992, which was the first publication of the Canadian National Breast Screening Study, because there were a significant imbalance of advanced cancers. In the very first year of the study, there were 25 advanced cancers, and they defined that as a cancer with or more positive lymph nodes in the armpit. There were 19 of them in the mammogram group and only 5 in the control group. So this was raised decades ago, and the principal investigators of the trial have denied it to this day. They claim that there was nothing wrong with the randomization. There was even a forensic.
Dr. Gordon,
Yes.
sorry, can I cut you off? Because in fairness, I want to give Dr. Narada an opportunity to respond to this.
You give my study, give all the time for your question to Dr. Gordon, who just, I got 30 seconds now?
Well, I'm
let
giving
me
you the
comment.
time, and other people can give you the time as well. But I do want to hear from you in response to that
because this is
accusation.
my study. The data's on my computer. Dr. Gordon and others made a claim of scientific misconduct to the University of Toronto last year, at which point I prepared a report on exactly what she's claiming. And that report was submitted to the Dean of Public Health Sciences and was submitted to an international committee who reviewed the study and came out entirely on my side. Let me just tell you a couple of facts. In the first round of screening, there were 270 palpable cancers in the mammography side and 274 palpable cancers in the control group. If we had shunted women from the mammogram group to the mammogram group who had a palpable cancer, that number would be different. There were 270 in the mammogram group and 274 in the non-mammogram group. Secondly, I removed all those women from the first round. I removed all the women with a palpable cancer from the analysis and reran it. The hazard ratio is 1.01. Third, I looked, if what they're saying is true, then the death from the cancer excessive in the mammogram group should occur in the first 5 years. This is a 30-year study. When I looked at the annual rates of mortality in the 30 years of follow-up, there was no difference in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. What Dr. Gordon is alleging is that I should see excessive breast cancer deaths from the people who had prevalent breast cancer the first round of screening, at which point we should see a high rate in the first group. Now, if I remove all the palpable cancers, which you can do, then I can get a hazard ratio of 1. Secondly, the concept of a palpable cancer being excluded is ridiculous. Let's put it this way. In the studies which Dr. Gordon claims are the ones that provide evidence in favor of mammography was a Swedish 2-county study. That was a study where the randomization was in 16 blocks of counties in Gothenburg and Östergötland, Sweden. Now, what did they do? They invited half the women to have a mammogram, and they didn't invite the others. They were just followed. They were following the cancer
Dr.
registry.
Nayrod, Dr. Ellis may elect to have you continue on, but we're over time, and Dr. Ellis has the floor next for 5 minutes.
Well, thanks very much, Chair. Obviously, there's some significant feelings on both sides of this argument, which we are experiencing. Dr. Nayrod, maybe you could sum up. I think it's only fair to allow you to have your say. You've been at this a long time.
Thank you. So in the Swedish trial, what happened? They invited the women to come to the physics for an mammogram, and they didn't. And half the women were not invited. Well, how do you know they didn't have a palpable cancer? The ones that came, they could have excluded with a palpable cancer, but the controls were never examined. The controls were never examined. They don't know they had a palpable cancer, no cancer. But that trial, the Swedish trial, is considered the gold standard. And I've reviewed it in very closely and found many things that I consider to be inadequate in the Swedish trial. Now, Dr. Gordon claims there are 8 trials, of which only the Canadian trial is an outlier. I would love to see the other 7. The only 2 I know of are the Swedish trials. I would love to see the references to the other 6 trials, which I'm not aware of. I'm only aware of the UK AIDS trial, which showed no effect. I'm aware of the HIP trial, which showed no effect after 15 years of follow-up, the Edinburgh trial. But to come to this committee and say there are 8 trials which show an effect, randomized trials, and 1 that doesn't, is something, if I were this committee, I would wish to have that evidence. Trust me, it's not. There are not 8 trials that show a benefit. And if there are, I'll be very willing to apologize to Dr. Gordon and the others.
Thanks, Dr. Nayrod.
I'm happy to supply
Dr.
that
Gordon,
evidence later.
If
I
you
love
table
that.
Supply that evidence.
Table that with the committee, we'd be ever so grateful. Dr. Simard, you haven't had a chance to weigh in. I think what we've heard is, if I might summarize, is that Dr. Wilkinson and Dr. Gordon would suggest that moving the age for screening for asymptomatic women to age 40 would be appropriate and supported by the science. And Dr. Nayrod, I would suggest, is not supportive of that change. And again, I'm not wanting to put words in people's mouths, but Dr. Simard, I know your focus is slightly different, and I think is more, if I could use a term, talking about more precision diagnostics, and I think that that's obviously the way of the future. But maybe if you have an opinion, sir, if you could weigh in on what you think the Canadian Task Force should be doing, then I think we'd be beneficial of that.
Yes, in fact, it's what we propose is to have a risk assessment, for example, at 40 years old, and based on their risk group, then risk category, then it's a risk stratification. Then those women who have a risk equivalent to the population, they can start later. But those having the 20% of those women having intermediate or high risk should start at 40 years old. Then I think it's important to have a comprehensive risk assessment. By the way, it's not so futuristic. It's here we need a political will. Currently, when we release the comprehensive risk prediction tool by my colleague at the University of Cambridge in UK since 2020, already 1.7 million times have been used for risk assessment in 120 countries. Then this is real world. Of course, if it's not available currently, the polygenic risk score, it will cost the same amount of money than a mammogram, than around $100, and it can be done once in a lifetime. Then it's just need political will to introduce this test. Any good lab, genomic lab in Canada, because we have very good platform and good clinical lab, can perform maybe 5,000 or 10,000 tests per week. Then it's not so futuristic. Then we need political will to introduce innovation. And the goal of our research is to provide innovation. And 2 weeks ago, the Ministry of Health, during the annual meeting of the Programme de Cancérologie de Québec, they gave us the award for our project for health promotion and prevention of cancer. Then we work,
Sorry, Dr. Samard, could I just interrupt you one sec? When we're talking about the Canadian guidelines here, would you suggest then that there would be an addition to say that the polygenic screening that you have researched should be a part of those guidelines as well?
a comprehensive risk assessment, yes.
And can you table that research with the committee as well, Dr. Samard?
Yeah, I provide a slide deck, and they should provide you one. They just look for the translation, but I think that...
okay, perfect. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Samard. Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Next, Mr. Johari, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome to all the witnesses. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to meet with Cancer Action Now Association. It was a very interesting meeting. It was quite informative. They talked about a lack of Canada-wide standards around early detection program, which covers the spectrum of services on the what we call technology side. They talk about the biomarkers or genetic testing. They talked about various tests that's available, such as CT scan, MRI, ultrasound, mammogrammy, as well as they also talked about the need to access for support, long wait, the reduction of the long wait time and access to oncologists. But what came very clear is that they felt that we don't have an early detection program that addresses a variety of consideration. And they talked about some of the jurisdictions and the fact that ethnicity, age, demographic, and all of those plays a role in that early detection. So my question to any of the witnesses who are comfortable talking about, responding to this is there any jurisdiction that we could look into around best practices around early detection programs supported by data and modeling that covers a spectrum of aspect of cancer detection? Anyone wants to comment? Dr. Wilson, you're here in the room, so.
So you're talking about a jurisdiction in Canada?
Well, I'm talking about early detection program that is standardized across Canada. And is there any jurisdiction, is any country in the world that is leading in using data and modeling as well as all those various elements into making sure that they have the best early detection program that we could model after?
So our early detection program are in essence our task force guidelines, because those guidelines tell family doctors what to be doing for their patients and what tests to be ordering. And so
compare that to how does that compare to other countries that are leading this?
So I would say probably our closest counterpart is the U.S., and they seem to be more open to looking at newer data that's not standardized, randomized controlled trials. They seem to be more proactive. We tend to be very reactive with our guidelines. I think they're more innovative in terms of looking towards changes that could be made. So I think they would be...
Sorry, I'm interrupting. So you're saying if we model our early detection program after the U.S. model, then it is a good start.
I think that openness to different methodological processes would be good. When we say early detection, we're talking screening in essence, I think, although you're talking about some other, there's many things that are coming down the pipeline that may one day, we may be able to do a single blood test that does a screen, but we are not there yet. And so we have to... Any
country that is really leading on early detection program, or you're saying U.S. is the only leading?
I would think U.S. would be up there. Some of the European countries are quite proactive in terms of breast screening, but I would go with the U.S. probably.
Okay. Any other witnesses who wants to make a comment?
Dr. Samard.
I don't think any one country does it all right, but we do see, for example, in France and Austria, women with dense breasts are automatically recalled for supplemental screening. And we have that now in British Columbia. Women who have category C and D breast density can have supplemental breast ultrasound screening covered by our provincial health insurance. We see in Europe, for example, the recognition that MRI for women with very dense breasts, with the extremely dense breast category, has now been recommended for all women, ideally every 2 to 3 years, but no less often than 4 years. The U.S. just lowered its age to 40, but it's not perfect because women should be having annual mammograms in the 40s, and they're only doing biennial. So we have a mishmash of guidelines all over the world, and I don't think any one country is an example that I think Canada can be a leader here. We can take the best of each of them.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon. Suite, Madame Laroche, pour 2 minutes et demie, s'il vous plaît.
2.5 minutes, Ms. LaRouche. Thank you very much, Chair. In this committee, a lot has been said, and we're coming to the end of the evening. A lot has been said about the importance of early diagnosis, and I think that we understand that there are a lot of cases of cancer, and early diagnosis is often very important to be able to act as quickly as possible. Ms. Wilkinson, I was talking about a lot of family doctors and early intervention. You talked about the cost, whereas a mammogram cost, I believe you said, approximately $68 versus $500,000, Dr. Wilkinson, is what you said, for treatment. So in terms of efficiency for the system, is acting earlier going to cost less to the system than having to treat at a later stage?
Absolutely. So our studies showed that if you treat DCIS, which is sort of a carcinoma in situ, that's about $15,000. Stage 1 is around $20,000. By the time you get to stage 3, you're up around $100,000, and stage 4 is over $500,000. And if you think that the women in their 40s are going to present at some point with their cancers, they're just going to present with later stage cancers, or like we saw in our study, they're going to be 50-year-olds with later stage cancers, or they are going to have more cancers in their 50s because we didn't treat the pre-cancers in the 40s. That all adds up into significantly more cost.
Merci beaucoup pour cette.
Thank you very much for that answer. In closing, I'd like to first also thank Dr. Simard, because you referred to the price quickly, but I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to say before completing. You were talking about the Wilder Penfield Prize for a remarkable research career in biomedical career. So this is a scientific prize for discovering the BRCA2 gene. So bravo to you for your work at Laval University. Is there anything you would like to add to close regarding this prize, and what could this help contribute to the future of research? When I participated in the co-discovery of BRCA1 and BRCA2, it was described as being futuristic to treat predisposed women. Millions of women were tested, and that's probably saved hundreds or thousands of lives. I think we have to look at the best science, at the evidence, and the best science right now offers us an opportunity to consider all risk factors, breast density being an important one. But sometimes when you combine it with other risk factors, you see that there can be mitigation. But what I'd also like to point out is that we haven't talked a lot about this, and Dr. Wilkinson did refer to it. There's the natural history of breast cancer is different depending on which ethnic group you're talking about. If African women or Asian women, breast cancers will appear nearly 10 years earlier than the peak in European women. So it's very relevant to consider women's ethnic origins and offer screening that will be appropriate. Thank you very much, Dr. Simard.
Please, for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Dr. Nara, the study that you did it include a diverse population of ethnicities that would reflect current Canadian population?
Current Canadian, these were
Yes.
recruited in 1983.
Was it controlled for multiple ethnicities?
As far as I recall, we did not use race as a ethnicity as a covariate.
Thanks.
They were
Thanks.
98% white.
98% white?
Probably.
Okay, thanks. Dr. Gordon, can you name the 8 studies you're referring to? Sorry, you're on
In
mute.
fact, there were actually 11 randomized controlled trials. The first one was done in 1963, and it was in New York, and it was called the HIP, which stood for their health insurance plan. Then several in Sweden. There was Malmo 1, Malmo 2, Kopparberg, Östergötland, and then Edinburgh had a trial. 2 of them were the CNBSS trials. CNBSS 1 was for women 40 to 49, and CNBSS 2 was for women 50 to 9. They were completely different trials with different methods. Then there was Stockholm, Gothenburg, and Finland. And of all the randomized trials, the Canadians were the only ones that didn't show reduced deaths in the mammogram arm.
Thank you. Just to get to the bottom of this, a couple things. Is there evidence to show that by delaying screening till 50, this has cost Canadian women lives by not being screened earlier at 40?
Absolutely. Dr. Wilkinson's data shows that. And modeling shows that upwards of 400 lives per year for women in the 40s, unavoidable deaths by not screening women 40 to 49.
Last word to you, Ms. Dale. We've heard that Dr. Gordon suggesting that dense breast tissue, women with dense breast tissue should be offered annual mammograms. I understand the Canadian Task Force has claimed that there is no evidence to support supplemental screening for women with dense breasts. Can you outline why you disagree with that assessment?
Well, there's certainly, first of all, I'd like to say that women with dense breasts are not average risk. So the task force has lumped them in with women with average risk. And then they're saying that there's no evidence to support supplemental screening. And we know that there is 50 years of evidence, and please don't ask me to list that, but we have that evidence, and we can certainly forward that to you as well. So the task force chair has come out and said that the U.S. said that there's no evidence, therefore there's no evidence, and it doesn't appear that they want to even investigate supplemental screening for women with dense breasts, but we know the benefits of supplemental screening for women with dense breasts. So,
thank you, Ms. Dale. Thank you, Mr. Davies. There's going to be 2 more rounds of questions, and next up is Dr. Ellis for 5 minutes.
Well, thanks very much, Chair, and thanks everyone for being here. Maybe I'll, certainly we've heard a bit of the controversy as to why this is difficult, and I'd like to ask each of you what your thought of the future might be with respect to breast screening. So maybe Dr. Simard, I'll start with you. What do you think is your future? And if you could be brief, then we can get to all 4 of you.
Yes, in fact, starting maybe at 35 and 40 years old, having a comprehensive risk assessment and adapt the age of start and the age of end, and also adapt the modalities. It means that mammography plus or MRI, and then I think that's the approach. That's what we call this risk stratified screening approach.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Gordon, please.
I agree that risk assessment is important. I think AI is going to play an increasing role. AI can find things in the mammograms that human eyes can't see that can help us predict risk. So the usual questionnaire kinds of things about family history and so on. Everyone should have a risk assessment, ideally at around 30. Average risk women start screening mammography at 40 and be able to attend annually. All women should be told their breast density, and women with dense breasts should have supplemental screening. There are new modalities coming online all the time. The newest one is called contrast enhanced mammography. It's going to be much less expensive than MRI, and it's very close in sensitivity. And so that'll make a huge difference. Only 30 places in Canada have purchased that yet.
Thanks, Dr. Gordon. I hope you don't work yourself out of a job with AI there. You never know.
I'm ready. It's okay.
Dr. Wilkinson, your thoughts, please.
I agree with Dr. Gordon. I think we need risk assessment. There's Mirai is the new technology looking at using AI to predict based on a woman's baseline mammogram what her future risk would be and help establish a screening interval. But what I hear mostly here is that there are so many new technologies coming up and things changing that we need experts who know all this stuff on the bodies that are making these decisions.
And Dr. Narad, if you would, please, sir.
The future of screening. Good question. Well, I have a paper coming out in the early 2024 in JAMA Oncology, which evaluates screening. I think that will change everything, but it's embargoed, so I can't tell you more. But I mean, we do. We hear about experts a lot here today. I would never claim to be an expert. I think it's important that other people give you that designation. It's not something we self-proclaim. I may say that I won the McLaughlin Medal this year from the Royal Society for the top medical scientist in Canada. I can say I won the Killam Prize for the top medical scientist in Canada in 2016. I can say I won the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Canadian Society of Epidemiology and Biostatistics in 2022. But that's up to the committee to decide who's, there are always people that have contrasting opinions. I hear them every day. I just want to make you guys aware that people have different levels of expertise.
Well, thanks, Dr. Narad. I think that's important to talk about the scientific method, and differences of opinion in that, of course, are important. Ms. Dale, if you would, often we think about absolutes, and as as a former family doctor, I would say that our job is to educate, in this case, women about the risks and benefits and help them make good decisions. And maybe as a patient, you might want to have some comments around that, if you would, please.
Yeah, there are tremendous gaps in education for women, but also for family physicians as well. And that's a lot in part due to misinformation and disinformation that is being spread. So we are doing our best to dispel that information. But a lot of it really comes from the task force, and that's where everything stems from. And when you're asking about the future, we're very much focused on today. We can't think about the future when we have so many women dying today, and especially with rising incidence amongst women aged 30 to 39. It's risen about 18% since 1984. So we need to find solutions for the women today.
Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Wilkinson. Briefly.
Could I speak to education of family doctors? I'd just like to make it clear that the guidelines are that the task force is a venerable institution, and there is an institutional bias that is created. I was the chair of the Cancer Care Committee for the College of Family Physicians, and I approached the college to say, could I do some education for family docs on breast cancer risk for women in the 40s after completing our research. And I was told I could not do that because it was not in line with what the guidelines were saying. I submitted a commentary to the Canadian Family Physician about this research and impacts, again, to educate family physicians, and this commentary was not even sent for peer review. And I've had many, many articles published with them. So because what I'm saying is different than what the guidelines are quoting, it's not something that can be put out there to educate family doctors.
Thank you. The last round of questions will come from Dr. Hanley, please, for 5 minutes.
Well, since I'm the last speaker, I just want to thank each of you for your testimony. This has been a really incredibly interesting and rich a couple of hours, and you've each added a really important perspective. I don't think we're going to solve all of the controversies in this study, but it does show some of the controversies and also the complexities of navigating a way forward. I will say I'm from one of those jurisdictions, which are all the smaller jurisdictions, which has been more permissive about breast cancer screening in that 40 to 50 age range, where we've encouraged that conversation also with a primary care provider. But Dr. Wilkinson, just to start with you, I'm really interested in your study, which I haven't seen on that what you call the natural experiment between jurisdictions. Would you describe that? I presume that's not a longitudinal study, but more of an ecological study. But is that how you would describe it?
Yeah, so we basically looked at stage distribution at diagnosis for the women who lived in these jurisdictions that had organized programs and did not. And what we saw was significantly more stage 1, less stage 2, less stage 3, less stage 4 for women in their 40s if there was screening. So they had more earlier breast cancer, less advanced cancer. And in the 50s, we saw a knock-on effect. So the stage 2 and 3 were significantly greater if there was no screening in the 40s.
Thanks. Dr. Narad, you said you read all of the scientific literature. Are you familiar with that study, and would you
Yes,
have any
I am.
comments on it, including, I'm just wondering if there's any possibility of selection bias in that study, or that...
There are a lot of studies like that study. Let me put it this way. In the Canadian National Breast Cancer Screening Study, the women who had their cancers detected in the mammogram arm were smaller, less likely to be node positive, and had a better survival. But the number of deaths was the same. You can't use that. All early detection works. It finds them when they're smaller, they're more likely to be node negative, and they're more likely. And the survival of the mammogram detected cancers was 2 years longer than the survival of the palpable cancers. But unless you have clear data which shows that there's a difference in death, that is only. Okay, so good.
In our survival study, we looked at survival, but we also looked at incidence-based mortality, just
Would
to
love
make
to see
sure
that.
that we weren't looking at just lead time.
Thank you. And
it was
I
significant.
only have 2 minutes left, but I'd love you to submit that study and perhaps what you had tried to submit as commentary as well, but was you said was not accepted. And Dr. Narad, I'm looking forward to your book as well as the JAMA article in 2024. I just want to shift a little bit and talk about Ask Access. And I noticed, I think, Dr. Wilkinson, you have a program, if I'm not correct, about accessing access to breast screening in women who do not have a primary care provider. I think that's a really, obviously, you've identified an area. I worry, regardless of age, in my territory, but also elsewhere, about women who are not aware of screening guidelines at all, who are often remote, and who are not accessing the available mammography programs. And it's not just about geography. It's about, sometimes it's social access, it's fear, it's trauma, it's psychological access. And I wonder if you perhaps could comment on that and how we tackle that area.
Just for those of you who aren't familiar, that we started a new program in Ottawa, or in Champlain region, called Champlain Screening Outreach. And it's a program that allows access for anyone without a family doctor to access cancer screening. But more than that, it also is a proactive program. So we go out, we link with different community organizations, for example, the COVID vaccination networks, to repurpose those for cancer screening. So we do a lot of education. So I think that's the model we need to move to, is more kind of outreach and education and finding those people who aren't accessing screening.
I don't think I've...
Thank you, Dr. Wilkinson, and thanks to all of our panel. It's usually, go ahead, Dr. Pawlowski, Jeff.
Can we ask, Dr. Narad, you had a response, I guess, to U of T about the accusations made about the RCT you were involved with. Would you mind submitting that to the committee? And would Dr. Gordon also mind submitting papers? Oh, is that?
I can give it to you, but I'd rather not give it to the committee. Is that
to the clerk?
appropriate?
To the clerk.
I'd like to give it to Dr. Hanley and you too.
Okay.
I would rather not the rest of the committee see it.
Okay.
Is that appropriate?
I think it would probably have to go to the rest of the committee,
Okay,
too.
like
But,
that.
but we can distribute it if you...
No, I would rather you didn't distribute it.
Oh, okay. You
Okay.
can privately do whatever you want, I think, after
Okay,
the
we're
meeting.
gonna try to wrap this up, please. To all of our witnesses, Dr. Hanley gave a very eloquent thanks. You can take that as coming from the full committee. I can also say to you that you are welcome to, and we encourage you to provide any additional information to the committee. It will all be taken into consideration in the study. So separate and apart from what's been specifically requested and what's been referred to, Dr. Narod, we would love to see that embargoed report when it's no longer embargoed, for example. But by all means, what you submit to the committee will be taken as part of the evidence of the study. And this has been a fascinating discussion. I know there's clearly been times when I've interrupted you where you've had something further to say. Feel free to say it in writing. Thank you so much for being here. Your expertise and your patience is greatly appreciated. Colleagues, our next meeting is on Monday. We had scheduled 3 hours, but we're only going to need 2 because we haven't been able to secure the attendance of Minister Champagne. So we'll be meeting from 11 to 1. The first meeting on the first hour on the opioid study, the second hour on the Medicago issues. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn the meeting? Yes. We're adjourned. Thank you.